6:30, I'll call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alright, next we have correspondence, visitors, and public comments. Is there any members of the public here in the room? Anyone online? Seeing none. Alright. Agenda review, any agenda amendments this evening?
Just under committee updates, I just have a little update about both Swanton and Highgate meetings that we've had recently, communications we've had recently about property.
So we'll have updates. I think this covers it, right? Okay, so we'll have those updates from Julie later on in the meeting.
We'll have an update for
Yeah, that it's on. We've got committee updates, so it'll be both facilities and the board's committee. All right, that brings us next to a tour of the Babcock building. So, it's a long-awaited tour. Who's leading?
Sure, I'll do it.
Let's head on over there.
Now we're out here. So a couple meetings ago we talked about the Habitat for Humanity project. So that is going to happen right on the other side of the dumpsters. So there's two small lots right over there. That power pole in the corner is the pole that they're talking about. That's our main power that comes in for Babcock. So they're actually over there tonight doing the underground for the gas, but right behind that is where those two Habitat houses are going to be. So just to put that into perspective, they're going to clear all the trees that are back there and open that up. And
they access from Main Street? Or?
Yeah, so it's a tight access. They've got a right of way between two houses right off of the corner where that pole is. There's a very small window. Very small window where they're going to be accessing as a driveway. So that will be there.
Jason, do they plan to build only one house there? They're going to try to get
Two.
Two?
Two. I was told two.
That's what I heard that
Yep.
before, but I looked at that land
I was
and
told two.
not one was available. Good.
Well, while we're here, I have this on for the safety presentation tonight for our discussion, but we had redone all of our signage 2 years ago. This was some of it.
Before we go in, you had mentioned that when we talked last about the entryway. Yeah. So this is where we were talking. So we've got the big overhang, but we've also got the kick out on the brick here. So it would be a lot easier in this building to put, a double door entry, a secured entryway. When I talked with John from EEI, he talked about a couple different things. We could bring the front of this out, incorporate this. This is the doors he was talking about to the gym, where we could incorporate that into a new front entrance. But basically, the way it would look is, instead of this being the principal's office, this would be your secretary's office. Principal's office would be in the back. So you'd have that secure entry to deal with the secretary. And then if we wanted to let them in, we could then let them into the school via the second set of doors. So that could all happen here, relatively easy, relatively cheaply compared to reconfiguring, say, Central Building.
So if we were going to do the other, we'd come off there and go over where Chris Dodge is and come back there and just make this secure area. If we wanted to take and protect that entrance too.
Over
right here.
So there's a couple different options. When we originally talked about it, we just originally talked about something as easy as moving this set of doors out to here, moving our badging system out to the face of the wall. Then you could have a door here, and you could have a door, just at the end before where that door is, and you have a small secured entryway, which would be easy. He did mention, depending on what we want to do out here, we could have a larger secured entry, depending on what the plans are, the overall plans for the school, as we get into that part of it, which would include all of this area, a small reconfiguration of the front. So depending on what we wanted to do.
For the other board members,
Yeah.
and Peter, I don't speak out of turn, but you know, we had a presentation of all yesterday at the last committee meeting, and the price on this was like unbelievable. But there's got to be other, there's got to be other options, right? Yeah.
It's all relative.
There's nothing's cheap
Right.
anymore.
Right.
175,000 for working on it.
Just for Sue, but yeah.
All right, I think that was it.
That's what I'm saying.
All you gotta do is put it all brick.
So this is our main entry. As you come in, we've got the nurses station on the right-hand side. We've got principals, and then we've got our main secretary, coffee room. Rooms 2, 3, and 4 are dedicated for our pre-K program. So that's this end of the hall here only goes to room 4, and then we start kindergarten as we go down the hallway. You want me to just go to it?
Yeah,
Anything
no,
to say?
yeah.
All right. Well, hold on.
I mean, good technology, this is kind of like Franklin's.
Very, very similar to Franklin. The original school was from that door to that door there, so very similar to Franklin, like very similar to Franklin. Conference room, this is our gym / cafeteria. Should have all the lights.
That's a motion light that should turn right on.
So do they use this gym?
They use this gym as PE classes for this entire building. And then we serve lunch out of here. They don't prep food out of here. They prep food out of the central cafeteria.
Okay.
And they transport the food over into this kitchen. We've got warmers and ovens and fridges and dishwasher in here for the cleanup and everything. But no food is actually made in this kitchen. It's just a serving kitchen. But yep, so this transforms from what is it,
Tight turnaround.
10:45,
10:45 to
12:15-ish.
12:15,
Yep.
and if you're not out by 12:15,
We've got wet
you need
floors for
20
gym.
minutes to turn those floors.
Yep. So yeah. So it's tight
Take
turnaround.
the
over
tables
there.
up and the power scrubber.
How many
20
grades?
minutes.
In this building, so we've got pre-K, K, 1 and 2. So,
Pre-K stay for lunch.
in their classrooms, they eat in their classrooms.
So you're serving K1.
I'm not sure if do we serve K?
Sir,
Pre-K?
pre-K, no.
Serve pre-K? No.
They don't eat lunch in here, they eat in the classroom.
So we don't serve them, yeah. So just K, 1 and 2 is what eats.
You still have the second graders here.
Yes, second graders are in this building.
We actually couldn't add another lunch block to the schedule without removing some PE classes because it's as tight as it can be. So,
How many second graders do we process? Five?
5
4. We have 5 grade 1s.
5 ones. Yeah.
5 Ks, 5 1s, 4 2s, 5 3s. Yeah.
There was that one.
That's how our number, yeah, we have a bubble.
How many are in?
We're committed to the smaller class numbers, so K and 1 have the 5, but our grade 3 has 5 because it's a really large grade level.
So
What do you try to do?
2 is split here and
No,
K.
2 is all in this building. All in this building, yep.
18, 19,
Yep, so we
5.
had 2 that
first
were
grade
teacher
is about
offices for
13,
intervention,
14,
those got
15.
turned into classrooms.
Grade
Okay,
2
good.
So
and-
all of these rooms are now
time there was some
classrooms.
over there when they're
Yeah.
lunching up.
Yeah, there used to be a split, 2 and 2.
And that was
years
tough,
ago.
that was tough.
Very tough, yeah.
Some parents
But
don't want-
because of that, we don't have art or music in this building. Art and music both happen only at Central. So at one point, when I first started here, we had a designated room for art and music, but we don't have that anymore.
So kids go over there
Correct.
for that?
Yep, so all kids go next door for art and music. Yep. Okay. Similar layout to Highgate, so when we talked about potential upgrades, not a lot you can do with height here, we just don't have it, this has a flat roof on it. So, you know, one of the things that John mentioned is, you know, spraying the purlings, the ceiling white, kind of drawing your eye up, brightening it up a little bit, all new lighting throughout. These are the windows that he talked about. They're all old wood casing windows, single pane windows. The good thing about it is we do have a nice overhang here where we don't in a lot of other places. The issue that we do have here is just the age of everything. You know, it's not in terrible shape, but it is old. So this is typical to this entire wing. Once we get through the single door at the end, it changes, roof structure changes. That's the 1979 wing.
Can I ask a question, Jason? So the only air they get in is through the vent on the lower?
No, we actually, this wing, we have two energy recovery units on the roof that feed fresh air into these classrooms. So we have one large AON unit that feeds the gym and the kitchen area, all your fresh air, your heating, your ventilating. But in all of the individual classrooms, we have a trunk line of ductwork down the main hallway. It's a feed and return air for these classrooms.
I'm asking, I think my main concern was cooling. Like,
We
is it
do
really
not
hot
cool,
in here?
we have very hot, we do not cool these
It
buildings.
seems really bad to just have vents coming in there.
Yeah, that's,
Just air.
so, right, we
I
just
know air's
have,
coming
we
in,
just,
but I mean
yeah,
in
no,
terms of
it's not
heat.
fresh air. So yeah, in terms of heat in the winter, we've got the heat here, but in terms of the summer, the only fresh air we get is what they open up in the windows and the fresh
So
air.
there's not
here.
much ventilation?
There's no dehumidification, there's no AC in this building. There's not in central either for that matter, so.
So do you have a cost estimate for window replacement?
It was in that, I don't know off
Is
the
that
top.
here? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, though it was broken down in that.
Because it would seem to me, and maybe it's a philosophical discussion, but that if we looked and said, every year we're gonna budget to do 2 classrooms.
Yep.
You and your crew with what kind of outside help you need, that we could get there at a probably more reasonable cost.
Right.
Not try to undertake it all at
Right.
once.
Yeah, there's very little payback, as we all know, in Windows. You know, it's not an
It was something
energy.
that we should discuss at some
Yep.
point to the budget.
Yep.
Or discuss AC, something that heat vent that they haven't.
Yeah,
plugged in.
something along the lines
would make
of
more
AC
sense.
dehumidification. You know, it wouldn't be, it would be nice in this.
I would think that would be even
Yeah.
more powerful than
Yeah.
the windows.
Yep,
The
absolutely.
windows are rotting, you need to replace them. If the windows are rotting, you don't want to.
Well, I didn't know
Well, I
they
don't
were
know if they
rotting.
are, but they're old. They've been
Yeah,
here.
they're old.
They're the originals up there.
They are.
Yeah.
Luckily, we have the overhang, so
They
You
don't get
know,
as much weather.
there was
These
mention
things-
of you could potentially put your hand through, I assume you can't.
Certificates from jumping.
It works,
I
huh?
believe.
I don't know if you heard that in that
Yeah,
presentation, you
it's
can.
not that bad.
Yeah, they're not.
Gym,
They're
not.
Yeah, like he had mentioned, like maybe you could put your, I would never let you have that, so.
These things, you have them in the gym too, stuff sticking out.
So that is what holds your insulation. So above the tectum panel, you've got flat styrofoam insulation. So this is similar to the roof that we just put on an MVU. So MVU has a screw type system. This is a toggle wing type system. So it goes, so you have a screw that comes right from the top, goes through all of your layers of insulation underneath your tectum and sandwiches it, and then it's covered with a layer of rubber. So that is holding our insulation to our roof structure. That's how it was done. Every school in the '60s was done.
shredded wheat.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep. So the ramen noodles up there. So yep.
I was the student that used to pick at the, when it was on the walls.
Asbestos.
Yeah, great thinking, Julie.
Yes, they're all.
These in the last 9 years have been renovated. So there's no more asbestos in any of the classrooms in this entire building. As we come through this door,
Did you have to hire to have that cleaned up?
yes, yeah, we have Catamount Environmental do that every year. It was a phased project we started when it was a Swanton board, and we just continued that phase every single year. So this year we finished with these 2 classrooms. So these are our newest renovated classrooms. Yeah, they are.
That looks nice.
Yeah, so when we do our summer project here, what we've done over the last 8 to 9 years, summer renovation here is removing the asbestos tile, putting in the new floors, painting all the walls, new cabinets, all new cove base. The only thing that we haven't done because of the insulation above the ceiling is the ceiling tiles and the lights. So as far as that goes, we stopped at ceiling level.
Is this where they only meet for part of a day?
What's that now?
Or is,
No, this is a second grade classroom. Yep.
what do they use for windows?
They're the only window they have is they have one single window with a door there.
Do they leave that door open during the day when it's hot?
No. For safety, we don't open any doors.
Did we ever open this up?
Yep. So, well, it's dependent on the teacher. So, if it's a year where they're team teaching, because you have first grade on one side, second grade on the other. So, if they're a co-teaching team, they'll open the door up and they'll teach as a whole. So, it all depends on what's happening that year. So, yeah. So these were our last 2 classrooms that we did this year. Next summer, the only asbestos we have left in here is this floor that we're standing on here. So this is the last phase of the asbestos renovation. So next summer, we'll renovate this entire hallway, put new flooring in this hallway, and that'll be it for the asbestos floors and mastic in the entire school.
What do you plan to use for flooring?
VCT tile.
So you won't do like they did at MVU with that, like that lacquer?
With the epoxy floors?
Yeah.
We can discuss it. It's very expensive. It's super expensive, but
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's some other products that are coming out that are
between the
similar
two.
though, that are, yeah.
right, there are. Yeah.
So maybe we can go to that company if there's some similar products and say we'll be a test site. If you wanna take it, come here and do it, we'll let you bring people over to demonstrate how well it's working. Remember, you have small people here, so it doesn't get the heavy reaction.
Very small.
So
those things that you got that are-
Pre-K and K, they don't scoff at like 8th graders in high school. Room 17, it's another classroom.
The Babcock Library. So the other piece on facilities that we were talking about with a potential reconfiguration is this area here. So there's 3 rooms in the back here that they utilize for testing and support services. They are tiny. They are about as small of a room. Yeah, and that's tight. So this was the other area that we had
You
potentially
can't
talked
really
about.
knock the walls down, can you?
No, we don't need that door because there's already a second egress to that classroom. So you could potentially carry this through and reconfigure this. Not touch anything out here, but you can reconfigure this. Even coming through to there, taking this hallway out would give them what they needed for space in those rooms, which would be a relatively easy renovation.
Usually one agenda. You need to, like someone to represent this MVSD. Julie thought about it, but she said she's got to put it on the agenda. I usually go and I have that, but when you go there, they ask you, when did the board approve you as the representative, so.
I like the sound of that. So this floor's been done?
Yep, so this was a carpet.
So this is what you put out?
Yep, this is VCT tile.
Everybody else is.
The reason that I like
I would rather
VCT
just have a
tile
quick
is
motion.
because no matter how you wear it down at the end, throughout the year, we can bring it back to look like this at the start of the year. So they can wear the wax off, they can scratch it, they can do whatever they want. We strip every single room, every single summer, and we bring them back
Nice.
to shine. So
This floor does look good.
that's why I like VCT.
Yeah.
To play hopscotch.
It's cheap, but it's cheaper, which is, really good, but we can bring it back to shine. Do I like them in here at all? It's up to you.
If you wanna see one last room before we.
This was the last room, so I don't know, it's been probably 3 years, it was pre-COVID. EEI came in and put in some LED panels as a trial, to see if we would like the LED panels. So this room, and this just kinda goes to show, all the ceiling tiles were replaced except for the 2 with the ceiling fans, and all these LED panels were added when we redid this room. We redid the cabinetry, flooring. So this was actually with the exception of changing the grid itself, this was a complete classroom renovation with the LED tiles, the motion sensors throughout the space.
Is that door in the corner an exit?
That goes right out to the little basketball court out there. Yep. Yep.
So with so many classes for each grade, I'm used to just one class.
Right.
So is it always the same students in the class, which I'm assuming it is? How do they know all the second graders? How do you?
Well, they don't stay with the same students year after year, and they are all together for lunch and recess. So, usually in kindergarten, the kids really only know kids in their class.
Okay.
By first grade, they know kids that were in their class last year, and then their current class, and it just kind of builds. So usually by the time second grade comes, they know most all of the kids in their grade level. And we go through a placement process, so placement does shift and change every year for the kids.
That's all I've got. You guys have anything? Ask away.
Building looks good.
Are you happy with this lighting?
Yeah. It's on the daylight scale as far as color.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the daylight color versus the yellowing colors from like 3500 Ks. This is more in the 5000 range. So it's more of a natural light color.
Yeah.
So I do like that. Personally, I like that one.
I think you've done it looks really good for a building that was made in 1964, was it?
Yes, it started. The first wing we were in was construction started in '64. The first year was '66, and then this wing that we just walked was 1979. So
John from EEI definitely complimented Jason on this building being so well kept. So
I remember we were on the Swanton board. You used to come to us with projects,
Yep.
like we do 2 classrooms every
Yep, every year. Every year.
Still
Yeah,
there.
still
Still
doing
do.
it.
We're
Yeah.
still on that rotation. Yep.
It's very smart to do.
The teachers get excited when
what's
it's their
considered a
turn.
retrofit
Correct.
and not a, do you remember John was talking about a lighting retrofit versus a complete, renovation of the lighting?
Okay.
This is what you would consider a retrofit.
This building was in tough shape 20 years ago. First came online. I couldn't believe it.
Take it away.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. We are excited to share all the work that's been happening at MVSD around the multi-tier system of support. And we wanted to start off by sharing a few objectives. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So today we really want to focus our presentation on understanding how the school and district systems work together to support students and staff, and to understand how the various initiatives that we have going on in the district are connected and contribute to an effective multi-tiered system of support. So I wanted to start off by sharing a kind of timeline. In fall of 2019, we merged as a single district, and the need that was identified right off was we hadn't done enough work with our SEL, or our social emotional learning. And so in December of 2019, we formed a team of about 20 people, including teachers, administrators, guidance folks, UA, all kinds of representation from our buildings, from pre-K all the way up to high school. And we contracted with CASTLE, which is a leading national organization, to develop our pre-K through adult SEL competencies. And then, as you all remember, in March of 2020, we locked down. But the team made the decision that they wanted to continue that work. They felt it was really critical to us moving forward, and we continued working virtually, and we rolled those SEL competencies out in August of 2020. And then last year, as you all know, we had to develop a recovery plan which was required by the Agency of Education. And during that recovery planning process, members of the team identified a need to have an MTSS audit. So really looking at our system and identifying what our strengths were, what were the needs, and then how do we work on those needs. It was recommended that we look into the American Institutes for Research, which is a national organization, and we contracted with them and started working with Amy Peterson from AIR. And she conducted an audit which was then presented to each of the schools as well as to the district. And based on that, each school decided to work on one or two recommendations. And then of course as a district, we also started working on some of those recommendations. In the meanwhile, the other need that had been identified was we had decided we wanted to develop a portrait of a graduate for MVSD. So that work was going on simultaneously with the SEM work. And there were such strong connections between the two happening at that time. In summer of this year, we adopted the portrait of a graduate, the board did, and the district is continuing to work with AIR consultant on really strengthening our student supports. And currently we are in the process of updating our staff because the question always comes up, why are we doing all these different things? But it all contributes to developing one strong system of support. And so here you can see these are the 6 characteristics that were identified as what we wanted our students to leave MVSD with, which contributes to success in school, success in life, and are critical to students being, professional, going to college, whatever they decide to do. These were the dispositions and characteristics that were identified as being really important to us. And then I know Julie worked with the board to identify what were those different characteristics and what were the indicators under each of them. So this took a 2-year process. We worked with Up for Learning, which is a Vermont-based organization, to help implement, to discover firstly what were the skills and characteristics, and then develop our own portrait of a graduate. So that was the timeline, and now I'm going to turn it over to Wendy, who's going to walk you through the process of a student who enters our system and when they leave our system, what we want them to be in.
Thank you, Coach Shat. So we have a clearly defined vision and goal for graduates of our school district. And thinking about a student who enters potentially at the age of 3 as a preschooler, who may be with us for 15 years, plus or minus, what happens over that period of time? What does our multi-tiered system of support look like for a student in our district? Each year, students experience an environment and professionals around them that provide a unique experience, but how do we build year upon year so that a student gets from a seedling all the way to a fully developed fruit? What is the optimum conditions for a student to grow and learn in our district? So here we see an image of 3 interconnected years. And this helps to represent, if we're thinking of where we're heading with a portrait of a graduate, what does the district and school need to provide in the ways of supports and systems to staff and to students in order to reach the goal and vision of a portrait of a graduate? What do staff need in order to support students in order for them to be successful as well? And then finally, what do students really need during their schooling here at the district to really realize the outcomes that we're looking for? When the systems are functioning properly, just like these years, they are interconnected and turn each other, and we have a functioning multi-tiered system of support. So first looking at students.
Students need to ultimately feel like they belong, and they need to be able to attend and engage in their learning activities each and every day. They need to have high quality instruction, and they also need to be held to high expectations. That was something that we heard again and again when Julie came back to us and reported out on the board work, that high expectations are what students need in order to succeed. They also need to have the supports to help them achieve those high expectations. They need access to a continuum of learning, and they need social supports and learning supports that are based on their individual needs and interests. So now, what do staff need in order to support students to be successful? Well, staff also need to really feel like they belong, that they're valued, and that they bring expertise to the classroom each and every day. They need to be skilled in their content area and also skilled in instructional delivery. They need to be present and flexible, and they need to be data literate. They need to use data to drive instruction. They need opportunities to plan together as teams, and they also need clear channels of communication so they know how to communicate when they have a need and access support. They need PD to extend their skills, but they also need to really understand how the initiatives in each of the schools and the districts are working together to support the student along a journey. So what systems and supports do the schools in our district and the district need to provide? Well, we need to provide that culture of belonging so that all students and adults can be engaged. We also need to engage families and the community in our school improvement goals. We need to have prioritized initiatives that are aligned with our continuous improvement goals. And we need to also schedule time that focuses on student outcomes so that we can plan proactively for educational supports that are needed. We need to provide mentoring for new educators and professional development for all staff so they truly understand how all those pieces of the gears work together. We need data systems and assessments for decision making and established communication protocols with an aligned message. Finally, we need to make sure we have an equitable, needs-based resource allocation that we can access and use to make sure that everything is going where it needs to go. So if we think back to the image of the growing tree, if we're going to produce apples to reach our vision of Portrait of a Graduate, what are the optimum conditions? What's needed in that soil to nurture our student from seed to fruit? Well, we know that this comes from a system of integrated supports, and that's working with educators, the schools, the district, and the community together. We use the MTSS framework that Tanya will describe a little more in detail in just a moment, and that it makes a system to help our students grow and learn. It's not something extra on top of what we're doing, but it's fully integrated into work that's already underway. So now we will take a look at the essential considerations, thinking about that soil and what we need to do for the student at each part of their journey along their growth and learning. And we'll hear from Tanya.
So generally speaking, a multi-tiered system of support for us is based on the Vermont multi-tiered system of support. So you could link to the link there, and you can see how the state of Vermont has defined that. So we're developing our MTSS based on that framework. So generally speaking, it's a tiered or layered instructional approach. So the term tiered was used for a while, right? You had tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 services or instruction. Now the thinking is more about layering on supports, right? So a layer of, you may experience layer 1, tier 1 supports at the classroom level, but then if a student were to need an additional support at another layer, they could get a layer 2, they could get a layer 3, right? So there are multiple layers, tiers of instruction that a student could get depending on their need. The idea is that the need, the layer, the tier of instruction matches the need. So it's not necessarily a process that one has to go through to reach a different tier, but it's access to different supports when they need it. So our goal really is that all students have access to that high quality first instruction, that classroom-based instruction, and then as supplemental services are needed, the students could access that through a process. This is just the visual of the Vermont MTSS with swirls that can, if you kind of read them sideways, they're basically all kind of situated in this idea that we're all in a culture of continuous improvement, which is all the work we do in terms of looking at our data, deciding what our needs are, figuring out what the PD would be, and what we need to do next. So we're continuously in the cycle of improvement, and within that, we're looking at we're looking at high quality instruction intervention, comprehensive assessment system, our effective collaboration amongst our teachers and staff, and then the expertise development of our staff. So again, the MTSS is really a framework for all students. Okay? And especially you see that come up more and more with Act 173 and this idea that all students get access to what they need when they need it. It's a flexible system, yet it's predictable. So it doesn't mean it's just willy-nilly. It means we're developing a system that we have processes for referring students, processes for monitoring their progress, processes for changing that intervention when it doesn't work, right? And so the idea is that students get what they need, and as we monitor progress, then they may not need it anymore, or they may need more or additional. So it's that idea of a system that's prevention focused, so there's a heavy emphasis on the proactive end of an MTSS, and early identification of when a child might struggle. And the MTSS really, we talked about SEL to begin with, it's both. It's academic and social emotional learning, right? And so we have that system that's thinking both academically and through the SEL lens. It's a data-driven system. It is comprehensive, so it's really the idea, right? MTSS is really just the idea that everything we do is somehow connected and it's feeding into the end goal. And so those within the system, right? Communication is important. Processes, procedures are important. High quality instruction. I think we've said that. Equitable and evidence based. Right. It really capitalizes on collective expertise. That's why our ESTs, for example, are multidisciplinary teams, right? They're people from various facets of our buildings that sit and think about how to problem solve. So we're collectively capitalizing on the expertise of various professionals, and it is built on that effective collaboration as a cornerstone. And then, so that was sort of like the general MTSS based on that Vermont. Coach will talk a little bit more about now narrowing down on how exactly that plays out in our district.
So one of the questions that always comes up with teachers is we have so many different things going on. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to present a visual that would help people understand that all those initiatives fall within those components of a multi-tiered system of support. So if you look at the first one, it's high quality instruction and intervention, right? So when we adopted the Marzano framework 7 years ago, we've got curriculum, we've got our SEL competencies, we've got UDL. All these things contribute to that real strong first instruction. And they are happening simultaneously, you can't separate them. And then we really talked about how do we target those evidence-based instructions. So if a student has, say, academic needs, but they've also got behavioral needs or social emotional, or there's some kind of issue with their attendance, how do we wrap around those kids so that we are providing them the support that they can be successful in school and later on in life? And then the interventions are based on academics, they could be based on attendance. As you all know, we hired Celine Riendo last year, and she is working with those students who are at high risk for attendance issues. And then we have behavioral teams in each of our buildings who then address students who have issues with that, because if that is interfering with their academic achievement, we want to make sure that we have supports in place for them. The next component is really that comprehensive assessment system. And over the last few years, we adopted STAR 360 as our universal screener for math and reading. We have Swiss data, which is collected in terms of behavior and referrals for behavior. We are in the process of administering our first SEL screener this year. It's happening in the elementary schools very soon, and then at MVU in November. We also looked into how do we how do we utilize a data warehouse so that all the information about a student is in one place. That was one thing that teachers have been asking us for. Like, if I am looking at a student, how do I get all the information about that student in one place? So we did some research over the last year, and we've adopted EduClimber. We just had training for our administrators and our leadership teams on that. And now you can access a student's information. It gives you the attendance, academic, behavior, SEL all in one place. So we are really excited about learning more, how to use that system, and to be able to respond quicker to students' needs. And then we recently had training on how do we use STAR 360 for progress monitoring of those students who we already know have supplemental needs. And then, as Tanya mentioned before, our educational support teams, one of the things we are really going to work on as we become really good at using EduClimber is how do we respond as soon as possible to students' needs, as soon as they arise. People have been working on teaming structures. You know, collaboration is a great idea, but getting people together is hard, you know, with people's schedules and time commitments. And all the schools are now utilizing their Wednesday collaboration time in different ways to get teams together, to get PLCs together, to get data teams together, so that there is that collaboration between special educators and teachers and behavior folks and interventionists, because those are all the critical players who need to be together to make decisions about what's best for that student. So they've really been working hard on that. And then we are going to continue to work on developing a district level ESD team to really help us look at that data as a district and to support schools as they identify those needs for their students. And then on the right side, you see those many of the things that came out of our recovery plan, we started exploring, okay, in addition to the current initiatives that are in place, what are some things we might want to explore in the future? So we've done a little bit on project-based learning, personalized learning, hands-on education, and then developing some of those other kinds of things that we want to, like mentoring students, having peer mentoring, using EduClimber as an early warning system, and then standardized measures for progress monitoring. So we are really working on how do we extend what we are currently doing to make it even more efficient. And then on the right side, the blue column, you see the infrastructure, right? Based on our student data, we identified what might be the top professional development needs for our teachers, and then finding either consultants who can come in and help them develop that expertise. I was just thinking in the last 2 weeks, we've had a writing consultant, we have an executive functions consultant, we've had many different consultants. We had Tina Bugren last week coming and doing the instruction framework with new teachers. So we continue to help develop that expertise among all our staff. And then really targeting our professional development around content. So one of the things we've been encouraging is when you have interventionists, have some of them specialize with math, have some of them specialize with literacy. And so we have, many of our teachers are going to the Vermont Council of Mathematics. They are having a conference and really going to teach them how do you do intervention around math needs. And then we have a big group of about 11 going to secondary literacy interventions. There's new research out there on how do you support your secondary students who aren't proficient in literacy, so new information about that. And then continuing to build on our new data system as well as teaming structures. So this, we really wanted to share like what we've been doing for the past couple of years and how we want to bring all this together so that it makes sense to teachers, to students, to community members and parents, and all these things work together to really help support our students and to make sure that we are providing the supports in whatever area they need. So that was the main gist of what we wanted to share, and we would love to answer any questions that you may have.
Comments, questions from board members?
Go ahead, Peter, I got a list.
I got Joanne
Oh, wow.
first.
Joanne, go Joanne.
I only have one. So, and I'm not sure, I apologize, who presented the gears. And so those gears working together or needing to work together in order for this, to go well. And then afterwards, there was a whole slew of needs for the students and for the staff and then for the district. So my question is, are these gears working together? Is there one gear that's working better than another gear? Is there improvement? Is there a gear that is needing improvement?
Yeah, I think,
Oil?
yeah, I think, when you think of the school systems, right, each school has a system in place. Is there room for improvement? Always, right? And then the district, through our recovery process, we are now moving forward with that, and we have developed a continuous improvement team at the district level. So we have our first meeting tomorrow. So that process is going to continue so that as a district, we can identify what resources are available to schools to help them continue building their systems. The audit that each of the schools did identified for them what their strengths were and what their needs were. In terms of, are they all working well? They are all working. They can get better, we know that, and that's why we always are trying to improve and see what systems can be adopted, what technology or other resources can be used. One of the things that just came out 2 days ago was that the Agency of Ed released a report on multi-tiered system of support for the state. And this was based on data that was gathered from principals in May. On each principal in the state had to answer questions about their multi-tiered system of support. And based on that, one of the things that came out was that how much are we actually involving students in this decision making? And I think in general, as a state, we aren't doing that well in that. And so that's an area that I'm actually just sent out an agenda on Thursday. Our whole meeting with the admin team is going to be around this. So we're going to look really closely at that report and think about, as we reflect on our current systems, what might be things we could do to address those things.
Oh, thank you.
Sherry?
Actually, I had a couple of questions on the Travis. So I'm thinking about how we're measuring this, and so I really, that was great, by the way, to see all the slides. It really made a lot of sense, the way you've woven all of it together, talking about the gears and all that was really helpful too. So I'm wondering, I know we use things like stars I'm trying to see it playing out. So I'm trying to see that Wednesdays, they're meeting, for either staff meeting once, but the other Wednesdays, the teachers are meeting with everyone. But I'm trying to see how it plays out. Are they only using STAR data, or do they take out who's meeting expectations, who's not? Does that come into play throughout with other little, whatever they have for their assessments during the time?
Yes.
Like they do assessments
Yeah.
on students on like a weekly or bi-weekly or something basis?
Yeah, so those are screeners. So the screener is given to all students. But then within that, we identify kids who are not proficient, and we do further diagnostic assessments on those. And so those diagnostic assessments help pinpoint what are those skills or content might be missing from prior years. And so the interventionists are trained to gather evidence as they are providing that intervention. So it might be a 6-week intervention, it might be a 3-month intervention, and all along they're collecting either data, which might be quantitative data, or it might be qualitative data, like is the student gaining in confidence? Is the student persisting more with a problem in math? So they're collecting that kind of information all the time. The teachers in the classrooms, and Chris and Justina, feel free to hop in, they also do what's called exit tickets. So when they've taught a concept for 3 or 4 days, they give a shorter assessment, and then they gather information from that exit ticket to see if students mastered that content that was provided to them. So teachers are constantly monitoring how students are doing, so are the interventionists and special educators.
Okay, I kind of got a little confused there, and I'll tell you why, because I'd asked you about STAR, and I asked you about the probably what you all call it now, every couple of days you do that assessment, that mini assessment. Then you said they use screeners. Is that STARS?
So the screeners are the assessments given to all students.
Right, okay, like STARS.
Like STAR 360 is a screener, and now we are doing for the first time our SEL screener.
Okay.
So that is the first way we assess. Based on that, you identify your kids who are already proficient or on track to meet grade level expectations. But it also gives you indicators of students who are not quite proficient, and then students who are way behind. And so once we've done that screening, then the EST teams sit together and look at that and say, okay, based on this information, which groups of kids need what kind of
Right, I
intervention.
understood when you said that, but I was wondering, if my question then becomes, do we only look at the kids who aren't meeting expectations in terms of this multi-tier level stuff? So
We
if
look
someone,
at all kids, so the kids, say for example, I'm teaching a unit on math, and I did my pre-assessment at the beginning of the unit, and 3 of you have already mastered and they're already proficient. So part of the MTSS system is to support the kids who are also at the higher end, right? If they've already reached mastery, what are you going to do to extend that learning? Because
that's not starting with the screener.
the screener also identifies kids who are above proficiency.
I guess where I'm having a hard time is knowing, the screener comes in, but so do these other things that you're talking about. And that seems more realistic in terms of knowing the kids between the teachers.
Absolutely.
So that data is going to these Wednesday meetings that they're having, it's not just the screen data.
We look at the STAR data is nationally normed, right? So that's a standardized kind of assessment. We also have something called formative assessment, which would be exit tickets, teacher-made
Exactly, I get that.
samples. We may look at student writing together. So it's all kinds of levels, so it's comprehensive.
I totally get that. So-
And in different areas, reading, writing, math, and social.
But you can't just have
emotional
teachers because they're creating the content first, and so you've got to have to standardize. and
Their
do stuff.
units are aligned,
Right,
so
gotcha.
their assignments are aligned.
No, but you also have a great question, because the general rule of thumb is you don't want to use one data point to make judgments about a student. So you're collecting at least 3 data sources to help you determine what are that student's needs. And as Tanya mentioned, if a child has multiple needs, how do you prioritize what kind of intervention you need to provide first,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So these are really important decisions, and that's why we were really looking for something like EduClimber which could help us with that. Because if a student is struggling with coming to school every day, you're not gonna put them in math intervention. You're first gonna say, hey, you know what? There's something that's happening that's preventing the student coming to school. So what can we do to help remove those barriers? And Celine's been doing things like even visiting homes, talking to families, saying, how can we help support that? If the student, for some reason, is having problems with being able to behave in the classroom, right? It could be triggered by something that's going on. So I think, the leadership teams really look at that from multiple angles and then figure out what is the best way to do
Right,
it.
and I think you explained that really well. So I guess I just have one more question, then I'll quit monopolizing, hopefully, and that is, what is the feedback, what are you using to measure the success? Is it the audit that happens on the multi-tiered from the state or the company? That's what you're using? Like, What about measuring the success of how these Wednesdays are, if it's really working? I'm just curious as to what you plan to use or what you're already using for those.
Well, one thing we're doing is we're getting teacher input on that.
That's why I wondered
So
how the teachers are like.
we're doing a thought exchange that I've shared with the association. And we are getting feedback on how well things have been going, and then input on what changes or things they'd like to see perhaps differently, and that's going directly to each principal.
That's great. Because I remember they were a little leery as to what they would use for, so I'd be curious to see how it's working.
So we're definitely getting feedback from teachers, but in addition to your question about the audit, one of their recommendations was every year each school does their self-assessment again. So they had self-assessed themselves on where they felt they were in each of those
With
components.
a standardized test?
Yeah.
Okay, a
It's a rubric that they have provided, and so their recommendation is at the end of every year in springtime, each school looks at their rubric and reassesses where they feel. So based on that rubric from this year, they identified one or two recommendations they wanted to work on. So for example, I know Swanton's really worked on intervention systems and strengthening their interventions. So then in May, you want to check again, okay, where are we? Have we grown in that area that we identified as a need?
They're not combining of the SEL and the interventions, those aren't combined, they're different, or do they include all? Like I thought we said we had an assessment based on SEL that was different than the multi-tiered system.
So the SEL is also, we are going to do a screener, but in addition to that, Chris has developed a PBI's walkthrough form. They also collect Swiss data, which is behavior data. So when a child doesn't follow the rules, then teachers fill out a form.
Oh, I remember you telling us about that.
So they've got a system where they're tracking behavior also.
I think another really interesting and exciting data point for us with MTSS is that as part of this audit that we did last year, we actually had a representative from this organization that we're working with come and sit in on a couple of EST meetings with parents present, one of them with a student present, sitting back kind of watching how we run the meeting. And that was part of our audit, to have an observation of an actual live meeting with parents. After those meetings were done, that representative met privately with those parents to gather feedback on their perceptions of the meeting. And we got some really valuable data from the family engagement perspective.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience with answering my questions too.
No, good question.
I was kind of on the same line, measuring it, and specifically the social, emotional learning, because how you measure that, can we tell if we're being effective or do we need to change what we're doing? And the other, and also in the same venue, we have this all-inclusive. We want all our students to feel welcome and stuff. How do we measure that, and are we successful there as well?
Well, as I said, we are just going to implement our first assessment, And one of the strengths, I think, of this particular assessment is that the developer of the assessment, his name is Dr. Clark McCowan, and he's working directly with our district, and he's going to align the assessment to our SEL competencies, so that once we finish the assessment, he will actually meet with the leadership team to interpret that data for us. So we are really hopeful that with that kind of expertise of the person who's developed it, and then really being able to see, hey, based on this, we can look at district level data, we can look at school level data, we can look at classroom level data and individual data. So we are really hoping that we'll be able to identify, for example, in my classroom, say I'm in one classroom, if I see a lot of students are struggling with relationship skills, then as a teacher, I can make a decision that while I'm teaching math or science or whatever it might be, these are some strategies I'm gonna build in to help students develop relationships. So we wanted to become an integrated SEL into the content areas so that it's not separated, because you can't artificially separate these things, right? So we are really hopeful, once we get that data, I'll be able to share more with you on, you know, what kind of information we got and how we're going to use that information.
I can just add that I think while all of this seems so large, there's so many things, and this is why we sort of keep bringing it back to like the connection between all the initiatives and where we're headed. Because there's so many pieces that we could work on at any given point. But so for example, with the SEL committee this year, there's multiple avenues that could be addressed, right? We could be talking about climate, we could be talking about self-regulation, we could be talking about discipline. But the committee itself has now whittled down to 2 priorities for this year, right? District-wide, 2 priorities. One being supportive school and classroom climate, and the other being school-wide supportive discipline. So I'm just giving you the example of like how we take the big stuff and keep it focused on the end goal, but then say, all right, this is what we're gonna do as a committee when we meet. These are our 2 focus areas, and then what that means in each building might be slightly different, because then that group is working, but we're all sort of focused on that target. And then we'll be identifying, okay, so what is that gonna look like? What's the system gonna look like that for that? So, though that's not the measurement tool necessarily, it is the first step in that we're narrowing our focus somewhat, prioritizing for each of these pieces.
No, just that the presentation last week, I could tell that Miracle and Natalie are very highly social emotional learning is.
Don, did you have something?
Well, thanks for my colleagues, they've eliminated only half. I heard the term evidence-based instruction. Can you tell what that really means?
It's literally collecting evidence. So evidence can be data, but you can't represent children all the time with numbers. And so what evidence do you have? It could be a teacher's observation. It could be collecting behavior data. It could be doing an engagement inventory where you're watching the student over time and you're taking measurement of how much time they're actually engaged in learning. So any of those would count as evidence. Is qualitative and quantitative data.
So once you have the evidence, what's the next step?
The next step would be to really look at that to see, as you know, Teddy was asking, is the student making progress or not, right? What is the evidence actually showing us? And are they making progress in certain areas and not in certain areas? So it's really using that evidence to help support the learning.
I just want to jump on that too, because there's also a federal definition of what evidence-based instruction and programming is, and we are required to have instructional materials and curriculum and instructional pedagogy that is evidence-based. It's not just, I feel like teaching this way, but that is evidence-based in the way it targets best for improved outcomes for kids at all levels.
But it does result in changing strategies, instructional strategies.
Absolutely.
Maybe the teacher has an aha moment, and maybe we're missing it, it's okay. We talked about the Wednesday teams. When I was on the Swanton board, they used to be something called the Wednesday teams, but tell me a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about Wednesday teams. Do teachers leave their classrooms, or is this a small group of people?
No, this is after school, so based on the master contract, we had 2 staff meetings a month, that was increased to 4 times a month.
Right.
And each of the schools are utilizing that time differently. Do you wanna share a little bit about how you're using it in Swanton?
Sure. So we've taken those 4 staff meetings and we've dedicated one of those to math, one of those to literacy, one to PBIS and social emotional learning, and another we've kept flexible so that as things come up and we hear the needs of the teachers and the staff, we're able to fill in some of those flexible pieces that come up along the way.
Okay, that sounds good. Sounds good and interesting. And my last one is for Tanya. Way back, you showed services, and you talked about some students who needed maybe the next tier or whatever. I was interested in the percentage, because it looks like there might be 15, 20, I don't know, percent of the students who really need to move to that next, have needs to move to that next level. I don't think we can get way back there, but at the time I said,
On this slide tonight,
yeah. It was early on in your presentation. You talked about certain types of services and construction, and you showed it, and you moved to the next level, and you said, and these students need something.
well, so theoretically, when we think about the MTSS or an RTI structure, response to instruction, right? So sometimes you'll see this pyramid associated with the MTSS, not the swirl. Theoretically, the thinking is that 80% of students should be reached and be reachable, right, through academic, social, emotional, at that universal level.
Right, okay.
And then it moves up to 20 in the other 2 tiers, but right, tier 2 would be a little bit, would be smaller, and then that top like 5%, right, at the very top. So that's that theoretical basis.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to that tiered approach where you actually have this delineation. I think for us, it might be more about looking at the data around how many students do we have on EST plans? How many, right, because that would be the indicator out of universal instruction to say who's needing something additional. That number would tell us, and I don't have that percentage right now. And I think that percentage absolutely differs building to building in each of our buildings.
Okay, you're getting at where I want to go with this, but not tonight. Okay, I think it would be interesting, I as a board member, to dig into that a little bit and just see what is happening. We're a unified district now. Well, I guess a unified's using other words. But are there things that are happening in one school in 3rd grade so that we don't necessarily have as many students in need? You know, maybe who their parents are. That I don't know, but I like data, and it'd be interesting in the future to see where the issues may be. You know, during my early years as a principal of an elementary school, it seemed like 3rd grade was a key grade. If you could leave 3rd grade really on target, you probably did pretty well. But if you were struggling in the 3rd grade, okay. The last part of that, then we'll leave it alone. So I was interested in that number because then there's another number we get every year, or we did. How many students pass, or no, I guess they don't call it pass, but you know, how many are meeting the standard, how many are above the standard, how many. And I've been around so long, I don't even know what they call them now, but the whole idea is how many kids are doing okay, how many aren't quite okay, and how many are really doing great. To me, those 2 numbers, as you look at those numbers, if we are only serving 20% who we feel need additional supports, and I don't mean the top 4 or 5%, they're different, but things like that, then if that's the case, we should go back and we should have a lot of people who are meeting the standard. So if we have fewer people meeting the standard, then what we say needs services, somewhere there is, I guess I'll say there's a problem, but there's a disconnect. So.
Right. That's why we said when we talked about the tiers, for years there's a lot of focus on tier 2 and tier 3. How do you get to intervention? What does intervention look like? What data do you collect? All of that. but the work is really on that universal, high-quality, evidence-based instruction. Because that's what gets the most students at proficiency. So that's where Universal Design for Learning, or PBIS, or Instructional, our Marzano Instructional Framework about what good instruction looks like, and the evaluation system to hold people accountable to that. That's where all that work. Right, so this is why the mapping of all of these things that feel like different initiatives are not different initiatives. They're all part of making sure that that first year of instruction is high quality all the time. So that's where the bulk of the work is. And you may see, next time we're going to have a presentation on where we are so far on our continuous improvement plan. But that's what we look at a district level and a school level all the time, is those differences. And what's showing that general classroom instruction is effective and that intervention is effective.
So if that's working, then we should have a majority of our students passing the standard or meeting the standard.
We're not there yet, but that's why
No,
we're
I'm
doing all
not
this
saying that,
work.
but I'm saying
Right.
if it's really working,
All those things are aligned, and
And,
that's and evidence, yes.
or we're missing some students because we're not here. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I guess I'm just curious about the transition from elementary school up to middle school, what that process looks like, and how successful you think that transition is right now, in terms of taking those supports that the students have in place and then moving those to different people, to different teams that are providing support since seventh grade.
You're working on it. Definitely the feedback you will get from middle school is that the students who receive a lot of support in elementary don't get that same support. And as they grow, they don't even want that, right? And you'll see middle school kids. So it's really trying to figure out that right balance between giving students agency and giving them the support they need. In the past few years, Julie, we've added several intervention positions to MVU, and we've hired specifically math interventionists and literacy interventionists. We have added a math coach, we've added a literacy coach. So we've definitely got more supports in place than we had a few years ago, especially with the turnover of teachers. Because, when you're in your first few years of teaching, you don't have that content expertise the way that you have after 5 years in the profession. So there are still a lot of challenges around supporting kids once they get to middle school, and we are really hoping that by building these systems earlier on, and as Don said, during those early years, providing those supports that kids need, we can wean them off it. But currently, we are seeing this not just in our district, I'm hearing it from other curriculum directors and even on a national level that there are a lot of challenges happening at middle and high school level.
I'm sorry, I do want to point out that the EduClimber as a data tool that would put all of, I'm getting 7th grade students, here's my class, I can see now in one place what their performance history was after a few years. So I have data in front of me I can interpret, not just maybe a conversation with the 6th grade teacher, but information that I can then use to develop my instruction.
Yeah. And one of our hopes is really when the incoming 7th graders, teachers will be able to look at that data before they come in the summer, and really they will be able to think of who needs urgent intervention for what and get it in place before the students come back. So we are really hoping that with the district, all the schools working together, we can make that more streamlined for students and families so that they get the support they need.
And I would say, just as an example, right, with that goal that I pointed out, the SEL committee picked like the behavior goal, right? So I met with the MVU team today, behavior sort of staff, and that was a focus area. This is what the district says, the team says the district level we're working on. How are we going to work on that? What's that going to look like at MVU? And kind of looking at the MU sort of behavioral expectations, and then the thought process today, for example, would, okay, let's collect the behavior matrices from the elementary schools, all three of them, and then figure out how do we start to align some similar language to the elementary school. So that's how this, in a way, the framework is just helping us, because we can just point to a thing and say, that's what we're doing. Now we back down and say, okay, what does that mean for us? So, and again, just another example, but in small ways, we're starting to get to that consistency.
And we are also hoping, there's going to be a big discussion on Thursday around this with the admin team. We're really hoping that we can develop some common referral forms so that everybody's using the same system to refer kids for intervention. Right now, everybody's been doing their own thing. So we do know over the next few years, we want to make sure that when these students are coming from 3 different sending schools and going to MVU, and MVU gets ESD from Swanton, that looks different from a ESD plan from Franklin. So we want to streamline that process so that there is more commonality, and that when the teachers receive these students as 7th graders, they get the same information. And as Julie pointed out, we are really hopeful that EduClimber, because it's also going to contain longitudinal data, they will be able to track down even 2-3 years prior, like what was the issues the student had, what were the kind of interventions that have been provided, so we are not duplicating those efforts again and again. So, more to come.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
We'll move now to Laura, I believe, for ESSER updates. And Julie as well.
Oh, no. Share a screen. We're gonna do this together. Why don't you do that?
So I guess not only is it required, but obviously it's important that we periodically update the board on what we're doing as far as our ESSER funding. I will start by saying that everything that you just heard also applies to what we're doing with our ESSER dollars, 100%. So collaboration, continuous improvement, student support, data, evaluating what we're doing, all of that applies. Those conversations happen on probably a daily basis in our office in regards to what we're doing with ESSER, as recently as just yesterday, actually. So just to be quick, I'll start with the COVID financials. There's just a link here. It's the same spreadsheet you've seen. You can click on it just to see. It's too small to see on this, but it's for your information. It tracks it all the way back to the start of the pandemic, and all the large grants, ESSER, I'll highlight ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 are ARP ESSER. The real takeaway from this is that we are now at the point ESSER 1 has been spent, ESSER 2 is being spent this year, spent down by the end of the summer, when we've supported the summer programming and the transportation and the tutoring costs over the summer. ESSER 2 will be basically spent, and then we're moving into ARP ESSER or ESSER 3 throughout this school year for things like contracted services, but really will be focused on ARP ESSER dollars in fiscal year 24 and start of 25.
How much is that amount for that?
Which one?
The last one.
Almost 8 million.
So we got 1 year to spend that 8 million.
Well, 4.1 has been earmarked for the
Right,
Franklin
schools, so we
project,
got
yep.
one.
So there's some bigger buckets, obviously, out of that funding, but yeah.
So Julie, are we feeling good that we can spend it?
Yes, I mean, and we're gonna share, I'm gonna,
Okay, I'll let you go ahead.
I don't know how to get out of this thing I'm sharing. I clicked it because, no, it's not. I'll just close
It's
that.
frozen.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you. Because what we wanna do is, we just have been meeting recently, looking at our data and reviewing our ESSER plan and making adjustments based on assessment information, and we don't think we're gonna spend the money here, so let's reallocate it where we know we can. And again, big buckets for that. So that's part of what we wanted to share there. Just wanna remind you that we have our stakeholder engagement plan that's on our website. When you go to our website, there's a big red button on the right, there it is, you link to it. and that has been updated. Every time we make a change, we update that. And then below that, we have the MVSD plan at a glance, which some of you will remember is the color-coded one that's easier to read. And now I'm gonna see if I can do what I did before, which is X out of the box. Yep. And those are on the website. The stakeholder plan at a glance I have updated, but I have to show it to somebody else before we put it on the website. But that'll be up and changed by next week.
They also go to the Agency of Education every time that we either apply or amend our grant applications. There's a direct link to our updated stakeholder engagement plan, so they're kept in the loop as to what we're doing.
So recently, just this past week, we've made some shifts. The facility assessments that were quite a bit of money that were in that original ARP ESSER plan, because we don't actually have to spend those dollars to achieve that goal and to get those assessment results. We have them without having to use the ARP ESSER money, without any extra local cost, but that was important to the board. So we've reallocated, that was $350,000 or more. So we have reallocated that into other buckets. We have increased some support for after school and summer programming. We have added afternoon snack. There's a subsidy there. A school became not eligible in preschool. It was preschool, correct?
This one's actually for everybody.
Oh,
We
it's for
lost our
everybody.
area, we lost our area eligibility because our poverty rates, we're evaluating why, but our free and reduced price hot lunch percentages have dropped in some of our schools. And there's something called area eligibility to qualify to get free snacks for all students in the afternoon. We've lost that in some of our schools, and so, but we know that there's a need. Definitely in the elementary schools more than the high school. The high school, though, we wanted to continue with snacks, so we are subsidizing that with some of this ESSER funding right now, which is very allowable.
We have reviewed our math curriculum implementation. I'm sure you'll be getting a presentation about how well that's going, especially at MVU. They jumped in, they're not piloting. So we have added some professional development for teachers there. And now that process has gone so well, we want to do some targeted literacy curriculum or programming, some, again, evidence-based programming. And particularly, we think we may be targeting our lower elementary, so early literacy. And so we are shifting some funds into that area so that we can have some better materials that are aligned for our early literacy teachers. And then the PD that goes that. And we have a board certified behavior analyst, and that was not in there as an ARP ESSER. We weren't using revenue for that position, and now we have space for that, so that's gonna free up some local, there'll be additional revenue there.
Can I just ask a clarification on that?
Absolutely.
Are you saying, back the other side, that the shifts, you talk about facility assessment without ESSER funding, is all that saved money going to this other, which is increased addition review? It's like these others are getting more.
Yes.
Based on just the facility assessment?
That was
One of the shifts.
one of the shifts. There were some other small things, like, oh, we're not going to send teachers to this $10,000 thing, so let's put that in literacy,
I just was
right?
curious.
So we moved some things, but one of the big, at first, the Babcock assessment was gonna be $250,000. Then we lowered that scope, and then they were able to give us that same information that met the criteria of facilities committee without actually that cost. So that savings, we're moving into literacy curriculum in other areas.
We're also constantly evaluating things like where are we with tutoring costs, the after school program, where are we with transportation costs? So I'm constantly pulling reports and evaluating and dropping those numbers or increasing numbers and moving stuff around as we see fit or talking with OSHA.
Yeah, it is a constant revision because to Dawn's point, we wanna spend the money. So we don't wanna have $100,000 sort of encumbered, and then we get to fall 2025 and go, oh, shucks, we never thought about that, we never reallocated those funds. So that's why it's a constant review process.
And just as recently as like 2 hours ago, we got another grant opportunity. It's another ARP ESSER pool of money with some carryover that the state of Vermont has. and it's specifically for mental health and wellness, and so we talked with Kosha today, and we think we can really utilize that for our art therapy for the next 2 years, which means I'll take another $200,000 out of this plan, and then what do we do with that? So it's literally constantly that we're doing that.
That's wonderful, and all the schools are getting that art therapy now, all the buildings.
Three are getting,
3 elementary.
no, MBU, Swanton and Pioneer.
So, I'm sorry, every time I touch it, I'm moving us forward by accident. These are the positions that are in the budget that receive ESSER funding as revenue source. And we are meeting with our principals all the time, getting ready for the budget and reminding people that these positions are things that we need to figure out the plan once the revenue goes well. And we're also evaluating the effectiveness. Part of this grant is that you have to evaluate the effectiveness of it.
10.5 positions.
10.5 positions. Yep.
Okay. What does that equate to in dollars?
About $800,000.
Almost 900 benefits.
Yep.
But we're also evaluating this. I, had a meeting, my basketball meeting that I had every month. The AOE was there, and there was a big push to be thinking about, again, just a reminder, is how we're using your title dollars, for instance, and how the ESSER funding is running out, and preparing for that to run out, and evaluating what's working, using this as an opportunity to matriculate those positions into your general fund or into your title funding, and shift how you're using your title funding. So the whole state is doing that work. You keep hearing me talk about all those adjustments and shifts, that we're all working on that to utilize these resources to the best ability that we can.
So we're being very strategic in how we step down off this grant funding plan, so we don't have a cliff.
Because there's this perfect storm brewing.
Absolutely. If
that,
everybody
there's
does,
positions we need and our facilities, so good.
And about 20 other things that are
right, there are a lot of pressures on,
I
and
appreciate
finance
this
right
update, fairly regularly because, I think from the beginning, one of my concerns was that we got 3 months from closing out. I know Laura said maybe an extension, we use that, and we're sitting on millions of dollars, which we can't be. I mean, we could be, but that
still
would be
no word of
nice.
an extension, I can tell you that. Yeah.
And the other one is, a lot of these things are really great and probably making a difference. So how are we gonna continue that?
right, and that's where we evaluate, is this making more of a difference than that thing? Or is this making a difference and we can now use this revenue source to support it? Those are the conversations we have to continue to have, because we can't just say, oh, this is nice, let's just add. That's not how it works.
I like the emphasis on professional development because hopefully,
Yes,
train 100 people, whether it's literacy or math or whatever, they all won't leave you, at least immediately, so that you have a core of people who have been trained who can keep things going.
yes, that's where you were asking me in another board meeting about the coordination of that professional development. And I think tonight sort of highlighted that it is all very much coordinated so that we're being intentional about bolstering our general first tier of universal instruction with best practice and giving teachers the tools that they need in order to really make those decisions.
That's what the
Rather than
curriculum director
hiring a
does,
lot
right?
of people.
That's what the curriculum director does, right? Make sure that happens.
So there's a lot of them. So some of the expenditures in the plan, I broke it up around our academic success and social emotional learning. Everything in the plan I have, the one that's at a glance is color coded, so I tried to align those. After school and summer programming, the tutoring, the math and literacy curriculum, the PD, not just for all teachers, but also specialist training. So Kosha shared a little bit about, I'm a secondary literacy or math interventionist. Am I just a teacher who likes math? Or am I a teacher who likes math and has particular skills to move struggling students in math? That's the training that we're trying to ensure. Also special educators for that. Also software for instruction. The Renaissance is the STAR 360, but also the Freckle is the instructional practice side of that. So students can practice their skills and improve. PBIS and the SEL screening tool, which I really like. It's not about mental health, it's about social emotional regulation and skills.
which is what we are obliged to do, we're not a mental health agency. And then also student engagement supports the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, hands-on learning, project-based learning, things that sometimes hook kids and make them want to come to school. A lot of times that's hands-on work. Obviously, our technology expenditures. We also are contracting our speech and language pathologists. We have they're awful hard to find, so we're contracting with some online service providers. We use the thought exchange goes through our professor. I'm gonna do that just this one more year because it is expensive. And then social skills screening tool as well. And also the safe and healthy schools, things like cleaning supplies, the snacks. Highgate is getting an outdoor classroom that falls because it's outdoors. So that's somewhat student engagement, but it's also part of that drive to have outdoor spaces. The electronic sign, we have approval for that now, don't we? Concept approval?
We're waiting for a bill base to sign off.
Right, but we almost have that approval. And we have the concept approval from the Agency of Education on the Franklin space. So we'll do this a few times a year, but we thought it would be important to do it before we go into our budget conversation. Because, everything is intertwined.
I think it's great to see the list of positions that are funded. I think that's probably the level of detail a lot of people have been wanting to see. So
We tried to make it not too position heavy because of the cliff that we will be at later. So that means 10 positions is pretty manageable in a district to see if we can figure out if they're effective and how we want to fund them.
any questions on ESSER update? Same time. All right. Move us right into budget planning, board budget planning and guidance. So this is, Laura had asked for us to help provide some benchmarks and guidelines for her work in creating the first draft. Part of this may be making some assumptions around salary dollars for the support staff union folks. That contract is up for negotiation, so we will have a planning for executive session around that item.
Also, we probably want to talk a little bit about next steps around the directions you gave us last time, where we are. You gave us some directions around mail-in ballots, communicating with the select boards, surveys,
So that's the overview of our general discussion. So Laura, where would you like to start?
Really quickly, you're going to be getting a budget workbook this year, an electronic budget workbook. It's like a little PowerPoint, and instead of handing you a different or making a different note page every time, I think it will be easier that I'll just keep adding to this running budget workbook. So there was a sample of that in your board drive. It's.
Do you want me to find it?
Sure.
Sorry. No, it is. Okay.
So I will just keep adding to this workbook as we go through every draft, and I will highlight things from the AOE that come in, or things that we talk about, and things that priorities that happen, and it'll just all be there for you in one spot. And I think that might help because it is a lot. We work on it for 6 months, so hopefully. So here's our budget development timeline. I did update that timeline based on all the feedback from last time. It's all highlighted in yellow, the changes that you asked me to make. So hopefully that's helpful. And then today we're going to be talking about your guidance, and I'll fill that in with things that hot topics, and then going into known ed pressures, which I've already started to identify, and then it'll just go through your drafts. And as I said, like information that comes from the AOE, like when we start to get preliminary equalized pupil, I will create an equalized pupil slide and I'll make that running. So hopefully you'll find that valuable. I think it will be easier for all of us.
Doesn't mean we won't give you those big giant spreadsheets in the budget too.
You get those too, but this is just to follow
It's a
along.
little easier to follow that.
You mentioned equalized pupils. Do we know what our equalized pupils count is?
Oh, no.
When will we get it, December?
Yeah.
You're supposed to get it in December.
Yeah.
we'll probably get our first one. It's supposed to be locked by
December 15th.
December 15th.
That won't happen.
It was never locked, even after the budget, they made changes. So, or after the budget was adopted, they were still making changes. So we're hoping that that's better.
That's such a key part,
It
that, you
is.
know, all the other things should go down the tube.
Brad James and Bill Bates were at our basketball meetings, and Brad acknowledged the fact that it's been late and he's going to do his best to get it out to us, and Bill Bates said, yes, absolutely, he will do his best to get it out to you. What that means, I don't know, but they said it.
Where are we gonna keep this budget workbook?
I will probably just keep sharing it in your board meeting folder, like I'll just keep adding to it if that works.
Go to the next
Yeah, I'll just
Yeah.
make a copy to the next one, copy it to the next one as we keep, unless there's a better suggestion, but that's what I was planning to do.
We know where it is.
We have that documents for the board, but so we might just move it there and then just move it into the next meeting every time it's ready. So if somebody wants to look at it between.
That's when it's shared,
Okay.
it's shared.
Yeah, I think if you just look in the folder for that board meeting, it'll be there. And if we need to link it to the agenda that we send out to boards, we can do that as well, just for ease, because I know that's easier for some.
How are you gonna let us know what item, because much of it won't change. Let's say the second one may not change that much first. What is the system gonna be so that we focus on the changes from that? And I know
So
color
I've-
codes work sometimes, but
Right.
they don't well.
So, starting with the budget timeline, I've identified at each draft what the big changes will be. So we start with salaries and benefits, then we go to contractual changes, and I'll highlight those on your workbook. And then we go to, facilities or things like that, so it's highlighted there, and then also in the drafts that you're going to get, the actual budget drafts, I will have notes in the variance column that tells you where the line items have changed.
All right, so the notes you read.
Yeah.
They will still be there, done, yes.
Yeah,
All right.
and I'll update budget
And we'll
notes
put it there.
on here.
Do you want to start by talking about some of the pressures? They're up here. I
Yeah.
thought it might not be a bad.
Yeah, because I think before we try to give you a target of
Yeah.
spend increase, we ought to know what's out there, because obviously we'd love to target 0, but we need to know what's realistic,
Right.
so I think it's a good place to start.
So, and these, you may be getting a memo from either the Vermont Superintendent's Association or some of the other agencies that are working currently on these budget pressures, because there was a lot of discussion about that information shouldn't just come at the local level. A lot of these pressures are statewide or even larger than that, so why are we sitting at the table and trying to explain that? It really should be coming from a higher level, so hopefully that memo will be coming.
Yeah.
But one of the big things is transparency on what makes up education costs. Julie can speak to this as well, but even today, it's all the pressures, so all the services we're providing to students that 20 years ago maybe we weren't providing, and that's based on student need, but it's also demand, new requirements that we have to meet. I'll let her talk about the instructional ones, but even today, I was talking to her about Act 166, tuition payments for pre-K students. There's a cost to that. I will give you that cost. I don't have it with me today, but also the fact that we are supplementing teacher retirement still. Over 20% of your grant funding and 20% of their salary, which we spend a lot of our grant funding on salaries, comes off the top, and we are subsidizing retirement systems with that. It's over 20% now. It started at 12. Now it was nothing. Then it went to 12. Now it's over 20%. Same thing with the other teacher retirement subsidy. For every new teacher going into the state of Vermont,
The
it's
health system.
into their healthcare system. Yeah, but it's any new teacher in Vermont becoming a new educator into the retirement system to subsidize their healthcare. It's almost $1,500 now. Every year that goes up, and it's for every teacher as long as they stay with us. So these lines are getting astronomically large, and they will continue to grow. And I think sometimes that we all forget about that because it's nothing we have control over. And then I don't know if you want to talk about some of the other stuff, but.
So Act 173, the special ed block grant, this is one of the reasons why we were talking about the Act 127 and the whether we can rely on what our equalized pupil, whether we're gonna, I hate to say winner or loser, but in terms of the tax capacity and what the, when we were getting that information from the state about Act 173,
our school district was always right in the middle. We weren't really gonna lose much money, we weren't really gonna gain much money. We were just pretty much gonna be the same. But that, in fact, didn't turn out to be true. We lost how much money in? Over $300,000 in special ed grant money
That's
through
because of
this
Sheldon.
block grant
Is
change.
that because of Sheldon?
Some of it is because of Sheldon, yes, for sure. And the same with the Act 127, our equalized pupil shift in how that looks. I think that our district will do pretty well out of that, not so that it will give us a great deal of excess tax capacity the way perhaps Winooski may experience that, where in Essex, Westford is gonna lose some tax capacity with that shift. We're again in the middle. I don't know to what degree we'll be affected by that. I don't expect it to be much either one way or the other. But again, the funding scenarios that they're giving us have not always been that accurate. Again, one of the pressures is in FY25, we have to be thinking about ESSER going away. So that's not as much of an impact for this budget, except we're trying to be strategic. If we have $100,000 going to a position and benefits, et cetera, do we want to cover all of that with ESSER, or do we want to cover a portion of it with ESSER so that we don't have a big cliff, that we're slowly weaning off that grant funding? Staffing shortages in general are a huge pressure. It also increases the pressure on the costs of wages. Student needs are increasing, the cost of everything. So transportation costs have gone up. Living in a rural part of the state, we already have high transportation costs. If I send a student elsewhere to go to school because of their needs, I not only pay the tuition, which has gone up, but the transportation has also gone up. Some of those costs are, I think our extraordinary costs plan is about just over $2 million worth of costs for our highest cost students, including tuitions and transportation. And there are no students on that list that aren't there without a great deal of thought, planning, and purpose and need.
I would just add that the service contracts goes to everything though.
Yeah.
Contracts, technology contracts, software contracts, maintenance agreements we have, garbage, fuel, and every single contract has gone up.
The facilities work that we're all doing, obviously not just the unknowns such as PCB testing, and the repair and maintenance that we have and those costs that are going up naturally, but we also have things like the roof at MVU that we want to make sure gets addressed. Health insurance premium increase, Laura told me 15%, now she said it's down to 13%, so that's going in the right direction. Last year we had a fairly low increase in our healthcare premium costs. This year we expect it to go up significantly to low double digits. And then Laura talked about the pension contributions. That again is about 20% of our grants of annual salary. And then the Act 166 tuition to preschool. Those are things that are just there. The other thing, we do look at the knowns, right? So if we take all of our existing personnel and roll it over for what we know the expenses would be next year and change nothing, what would that increase be? And it's pretty significant. So we're starting off, if there were no changes, with about a 6% increase. If the expenditure budget, again, your tax rate is not based on your expenditure budget, it's based on your net ed spending. But that is something that we wanna make sure we're paying attention to. So I'm opening my meetings with principals. I'm a ray of sunshine. With this.
Chris, you can listen, you haven't had yours yet.
You haven't had yours yet. So,
Wait, let me get my sunglasses.
We're the only ones that we don't have right now.
you know, and I just sort of take the air out of that balloon of of wish list, right? Right out at the top, saying we need to be strategic. I want to hear your wants and needs, but something usually has to go to match that, or we have to have a plan for phasing, for covering it. It can't just be, wouldn't it be swell if? And I don't mean to
to lighten it, but I really have been very direct with people about the culture. We had a difficult time passing the school budget last year, and that was in a time where we had fewer of these pressures on us. So I want to make sure that we're very transparent about them, that we're communicating about them, and that our budgets are built with that in mind, and we're very needs-based.
And then thinking about the phase 2 of the roof project, that's the other big thing that I think obviously has an impact. With that, we were almost at 8% of an increase with the other things.
Almost the what?
Almost at 8%. So, and that these are preliminary, and we're not, we're fine tuning our draft 1, but just quick, that's where these kinds of increases and pressures, and then you add in a major facility project, and the second phase of the room.
And again, sorry, I don't want to talk.
Go ahead, Don.
So you're talking about meeting with principals. At some point, we will hear if we're gonna add any new positions this year or doing
Yes,
any new
absolutely.
positions.
And for the most part, my conversations, for example, today I met with a principal and we talked about how we don't need this position anymore, but I'd really, instead of cutting it, I would really like to turn it into this because I think it would be very effective. So we're not just talking about, we're really talking about making shifts if you want to add something to cover that.
I really, and I know I'm gonna bring it up tonight, because we're gonna be talking about budget quite a bit in the next couple of months. I had a couple of things happen this year. Of course, our budget went down, but as a board member, I don't really feel I need to know that Jason does certain things every year. Trust it, he's doing certain things. Okay? But if Jason decides he's gonna buy a tractor, I think there should be a discussion at the budget time. I don't think you're buying a tractor, Jason, so hopefully I'm not getting it.
Yeah, we got it in my
He is.
report.
He is buying a tractor.
I saw it in the facilities report. I saw it in the facilities report, so I wasn't at the meeting right there. But I think that that's the right way to do it. It comes through some committee, the facilities, and it's discussed there, and then it comes to the board, probably for a recommendation of facilities, okay? So my thought is, that's the way it should happen, that the board would know that there's a need for one, but it didn't just get put in the budget with no discussion at the board level. And what brought that to my attention was, we went to an ag meeting, we found out there were about 3 pots of money in the ag budget, or somebody's budget, and I never remember any discussion, now I may have missed the meeting. They were gonna build a barn, we were gonna build a shed, we were gonna do something in another place. And so as a board member, I'm not saying that the outcome is bad, but as a board member, it'd been nice to at least have a discussion that the ag did.
Well, they didn't share that with anybody. They just put it in their department.
But somewhere, yeah.
But
Well,
so that was part of the challenge
Not even
there.
in their department budget.
They
so-
did.
And I know Laura's working hard on flushing that out, but I think
Yes.
as a board, we need to help you people so that the principals or whoever the departments get the message that you just don't do that. You may get it, but it should go through a process. And then the other one, and I don't know if Toby ever said anything about it, but I was around, not on the MVU board, but on the local board when that big football thing blew up. And then I find out in August, September, we've added another football team. And John says it was in the budget, but did anybody ever tell?
Those are the kinds of things, Don, that we want to make sure that they're highlighted. So if we make an expansion of something, that it's clear that we did that. Because those were things that, again, people just put in the budget and then it doesn't get highlighted. So, if you plan on putting a tractor in there and maybe using a lease payment and it's on your plan and it's in there, that's fine. Making sure that it's clear that those things are in there
because I'm gonna speak for myself, if Jason comes in and says he needs something like that and he explains it, I'm gonna support it, okay?
But some of those things are in the budget all the time.
Right.
I think that's what's important to remember. So we always have lease payments for tractors on a rotating basis because we have so many tractors and pieces of equipment, lawnmowers and things like that. So we always, on a
always in the
replacement
budget.
cycle, have those in the budget. It's the same with copier equipment because that's another giant lease that we have. The same thing, I'm trying to think of another one, there's more. But, so I can share that with you as a reminder too when we're going through these drafts that
I think we should.
these
And
these
you
are
weren't
things
the
that are
business
ongoing.
manager at the time, but we didn't know we were buying a tractor at MVU until one of the local dealers called the school board member saying, how come I get a chance to bid on?
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying, is I think it's a reminder that those lease payments are in the budget as a line item, and we will be buying a tractor almost every single year on a rotating basis, because that's what the cycle is. I can make sure to remind of those things as we go, how many pieces of equipment we have.
And why I ask that is, you know, when we were in a tough position, our budget failed, we had to look at cutting. I probably would have said, maybe the ag shed can wait, ag barn, because by the time we get our permits, we'll be in another year's budget. And I think so the reminder of a tractor, we might just say, yes, of course. But we might look at it and say, if there's some way maybe to stretch this a little bit if we're in a flip flop.
And one of the ways we do that as a budget revision is when the board comes and says, we need you to reduce it by this much. We go through, we talk to principals, they talk to department heads, and they say, we're cutting X percent right off. So rather than necessarily go through and say we're cutting this, that, and the other, we cut a percentage right off the top. Which means that those things in the end, sometimes they get put on a wish list, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's in the budget. And that's where I think that communication, we're tightening up, especially in larger schools with bigger departments.
And I think the reminder, I like that, Laura, because I'm sure I forget things. But the one thing I knew when I was an administrator, and I know now, we are the people elected by the citizens to put a budget. I mean, I've never heard anybody say, this is Laura's budget or this is Julie's budget. This is the board's budget. And so we don't need to get into big detail, but we do need to have some overview of things that have some significance. So, okay.
And the biggest area of significance you have is personnel, which is, 80% of our budget. So that is something we do want to probably discuss in executive session. One of the things that I wanted to ask you all was, what are some priorities that you might want to solve, or challenges that you might want to solve with this budget, so that our administrators can try and make shifts to address those? That was a question. Where do you want to end up, right? And it's hard to tell, Dawn, because we don't have our equalized pupils, but where is your zone of comfort when it comes to our spending per equalized pupil? And that is the last year we need to have that percentage on the ballot, but it will be on the ballot. So those are some of the things that I wanted to get input from the board.
I mean, I would say in terms of spending priorities, if we're looking at shifting and prioritizing, we've got to worry about making the transition to 2025 without ESSER dollars, and things that are in there, I really ought to be things that are directly supporting the vision of the school and directly tied to that for our district. So I have no doubt we'll be at a point where we see a percentage we don't really like and we just start prioritizing. So
yes,
the more strongly things are linked to the mission and vision of the district, I think the more likely many of us will support those things.
We started that last year intentionally, so we had about almost $900,000 worth of ESSER revenue on the revenue side, and we had integrated that much into the hope was to wean that back by 2025, so we did start that work, but $900,000.
facilities committee, you guys are holding a large dollar amount, I'm sure. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts on this at this point. Or
Probably a little over it.
okay.
So we just shared the new version of our capital plans with the facility task force as, here's kind of your homework, go, you could come back to the next meeting, right, next month and say, and really, I think, focus on it more so the facility directors have completed their plans for the most part and with all the things that they're thinking about for the next 5 years and how they wanna prioritize them. We shared that in more discussion at the next facility task force meeting on what the thoughts are on that.
Can we get that too if we weren't at the facilities task force meeting?
Yeah.
The rest of
Yep, I will share it in that.
Because, you know, we've talked about how that committee's becoming a strategic planning committee, so.
In terms of a target on where we want to end up, I guess any gut reactions to this 8% number we just heard?
I thought it was 6.
Yeah,
Without the roof, with the
Oh,
roof, it's 8. We can't not put the roof on, but I just, that's if we make no adjustments, just roll everything over.
I personally don't even, I don't want a number. I mean, if everybody wants a number, I'm not gonna argue with you, I'm gonna say fine. So grab any number, but, you know, it's just really unfortunate how the whole budget process works now in Vermont schools. And we have nothing to do with it. When it comes down with from the state, then we find that duplicate cost.
I was just gonna echo, I was just gonna say that before Don said it, like, I don't wanna give you a number.
Right.
No. I want a good school,
Yeah,
as cheap as I can get it.
right, I more wanna know what's in the numbers.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well said, Cody. I have my own little pad, if you wanna hear it again, you probably said, how many times do we have to hear this? I would like to find as many ways as we can to get all students coming to school every day. Because I still maintain it's very simple. If a kid misses 20 days, over 10% of the school year, how can you expect them to excel whether they're getting supports or not? And I know everybody's working on it, and I hope we make some gains, and I think maybe we have. And I know nationally we're in good shape, and I know in the state of Vermont we're in good shape, but
It's
overall,
still
we're
an
not in
issue.
good, I don't, you know. Good, I guess, is not good enough, so, you know, if people came up with creative ideas so that every child would wanna come to school, just think how nice it would be for teachers to day after day after day have your whole class there, so you're not reteaching, redoing and all this.
And students telling their parents and guardians that, no, mom, dad, it's important that you go to school.
Yeah.
I don't wanna go to Disney World on the week after February break. I wanna go on February
I
break.
know.
You know,
That's all hard. Every time I approve one of those requests, and I always do, because I'm not gonna tell the parents they're not gonna go see their grandparents or go on that family trip. But a little piece of me thinks just what you said. And then on top of that, you have, as kids get older and they have jobs, some of which are very important to the success of their family. And more employers are so struggling to staff the grocery store, wherever. There seems to be less of a concern about the hours that those students are working. And our kids are working sometimes all night and then going to school. And it's more of a percentage than it used to be. That's.
I just think if we could get all students in pre-K through 8, send us, I'm not saying we should put focus on high school, don't get this.
Right.
But if we just said our focus is gonna be on pre-K through 8 or K through 8, however you want to do it.
You got it.
The students at the 8th grade level, in many cases, were just at the skill level they needed to. I think we fall into place, right?
That's a very important message.
But you're right, it's not that, I mean, as a grandfather, I've commented inappropriately probably, but you don't leave every Thursday, don't play hockey. But I guess if you're good and you think you're good, you do. I'm not talking about everybody else's kids, I'm talking about my kids.
So the other thing I wanted some feedback
on, if you're ready for that, is we did reach out to all of our towns around, and we spoke with the Secretary of State's office around mail-in voting. And we cannot do mail-in ballots without the consent of each town. And they all have to agree. Correct?
Yes.
That's, okay, each select board. And we have reached out to all 3 towns. I wouldn't say there was any enthusiasm, because it's I think that the mindset is, but we're going back to normal now, and people can ask for volunteer ballots. So it was, I know it's a great deal of work, we've thought about, could we do all the work and then give them to them, because they have to mail them out. So we're trying to work with that, but I think it may involve, if you want to pursue that, I think we'd have to write a letter to the select board and try and have board members get on select board agendas pretty quickly.
So are you saying that they have to mail out their ballots as well?
No, but they have to mail our ballots, because
they
it's in
have
statute.
to mail our ballot.
At their cost?
No, we would, our cost, but they have to do the work.
very-
It's really, I mean,
Only if the select board approves that they can do that though, and all 3,
But they don't have to do theirs.
no. And I made that very clear when I spoke to.
So that should be an easier sell, you would think.
Yeah.
it's a lot of work for the town
Yeah.
clerks.
Yeah.
My initial
Right.
reaction was I would vote it. I think you're gonna get negative feedback, because I really do. If the board votes 8-1 to do it, I'll probably vote and make it 9-0, but I think it's a great idea, but I think it's a bad idea unless you have people saying, yes, that's good.
There was no enthusiasm, we'd be happy to,
When there's no
so
enthusiasm.
I just wanted to be really clear about that, because I think that our relationship with the towns is we don't, I wanted to be careful about that.
So my question is, do you think that was an oversight of them never adjusting the statute, or is it intentional to keep the town's grip over the election process of the school districts?
I don't know the answer to that.
That's it.
It doesn't really make sense to me because up until this point.
Right, so I think in either direction, I think this is a possible VSBA
Resolution.
resolution.
Yeah.
Because they're either involved or not involved. And I just would like clarity if that was a mistake, that the statute didn't get updated when we totally came out from under the school, the towns.
Right.
Or if it's designed by that on purpose. I think that's an interesting discussion.
It's 17 VSA
Yeah,
2680
right.
is
Right.
the statute.
And a good one.
17
Yeah.
VSA 2680.
Because if you want your ballot, you can get it.
Right.
It's disappointing to me because, and I've never been a big supporter of mail-in ballots, but I think in this situation, I think our biggest issue is getting people to vote.
Yeah.
And I believe there's supporters out there that aren't taking the time to vote, and I think having the ballot in front of them, we've got a better chance of getting them to vote.
I would agree with you.
I did share that
Unless we have
was
people who say yes, we think
the
they're
ballot
gonna
position, was what you were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we had.
But that is,
Yeah.
was it the federal government?
Yeah.
The federal government did that. And it says your town on it, because our local towns are responsible for the elections. But a giant company printed all those ballots, prepared all the envelopes, put them all together and mailed them to every registered voter.
I asked because when I got mine, I'm like, this looks really official. Like, who did this? It was
When did we get
So Julie, do you need direction, or are you just gonna wait it out?
So I think if we're gonna write the letter, we would need to take action. We didn't warn anything for tonight, so I think we'll probably throw that on probably the next meeting to talk about whether or not we wanna write those letters to the towns.
So I would advise, I know it's not on the meeting for action, but I would think we should have a letter drafted for the next
Yep.
meeting.
Yep.
Even if we are not gonna go for it, cause I kinda wanna mull this over and think about it a little bit more.
Okay.
But I don't, and I think we should warn it as actionable for next meeting, that's my thought, and have the letter already drafted so we can,
Yeah, we'll vote on the
no
specific
delay
letter.
if we decide to go with it. I don't know where, I have to think about it.
It won't hurt in the meantime between now and then to talk to your select board member.
You're right, that's the other.
One of the other comments was around that there's already a process for that, so like we should just pursue more, pushing the absentee ballots more, and I think we've done that more and more in the last 2 years, it's not been on every presentation, we've advertised it. And then the other comment, was that some people are very anxious to get back to the traditional town meeting, like the on the floor that they have in Highgate, for instance, but our portion is Australian anyway. But just that, that environment, I guess, is what people are really hopeful to get back to. So just like that whole feedback, that's important.
We did get pretty positive support for having a ballot box outside each polling station with a paper survey. So we will do that. I drafted a survey. I don't know that we have time for it tonight, but I can email it out to you all so you can see what it looks like. And it's been updated to reflect some of our priorities. And so why don't I email it out, and if people have any changes that they wanna see, they can email me. And I'd be happy to perfect that, but then we will have I want the same questions that we would have on thoughts.
I had a chance to look at the survey, and I actually would like to have that discussion, because I don't know, like, there's two questions, I have a question, and but I really want the whole board to hear it. So I don't know if now's okay. It was in the packet, I don't know.
Yep.
It's just quick. I would like to see after question number 9.
Let me get it up there, Toby, so people can see.
I would like to
I
see.
made paper copies, actually.
I'm gonna call it 10, but I really want to after question 9, I would like to see a question, so I'll call it 9A. Capital investments to improve and maintain our athletic fields and athletic venues. Separate from just the facilities. Because I think that there is a lot of people who want to see our athletic fields and venues. Not so much our venues, but I thought I'd put that in there as well. I think it's particularly our fields. I think there's I think we're doing great with what we have right now, but I think that there is voices that want to see us pump some more money into them, if we can.
I'm really pleased with the response, because I think that this could be designed. It may take a year or two for it to catch on, but I think it could be done. Is the box just gonna be there with no one with it? I mean, it's just,
Well, I don't know, I mean, maybe board members wanna spend some time, but, we don't, our school personnel, we don't have the capacity to do that.
a bad idea that I had, after I thought it through and shared it with my wife, thought a bad idea. I thought, we must have some teacher in the social studies program that talks about government and democracy and voting. If we could get students, but that's probably too heavy a lift to get them. It might get controversial. I mean, I personally, if I was a school principal, probably would be dumb enough to try it. I haven't had it to me, but I just think to have some seniors or maybe recent graduates, just say, would you fill out one of our surveys?
Community service, our seniors.
Student council.
Student council has to do community service.
Okay, all right, so maybe you solved it.
It is the week after next, so I don't know. I'm happy to send an email to that person.
We'll let the admin team explore that one. Think it over.
All right, that's what I said. I first liked it, but then the more
I did have one other quick about the survey notes, that is question number 7. Why are after school and youth leadership combined?
Because many of our youth leadership programs are run through the after school.
That's what I
So the-
suspected. I don't know, I kind of
Youth
think that.
project and some other leadership.
Right, I would prefer to see, just my own personal view, I'd like to see them separated or just after-school programming or youth
Yeah.
leadership, because I think that there's, I know that many of the youth leadership programs go through the after-school
Yeah.
programming, but I think, I would, because some people might wanna answer that differently, if
Right.
it's two different things.
Some might wanna support ag and FFA, but don't care about after school.
Right.
The only thing I wanna say, I will take the youth leadership out. When we do a thought exchange, I can only have 10 survey questions before I do the open-ended. So this paper survey is one survey. When I can add as much as you want to this, but I don't know how many we'll get. The thought exchange will send out to every parent and we'll put links out. We're gonna advertise it. JR will do a little 20-second video. And we'll get as many as we can, but I can only have 10 questions on that, including where you're from. So, and then I can do the, tell us your thought, give us your general input. So I don't know, you asked about the athletic fields. I don't know if that's the will of the board to add that to this survey or whether you want, to take another thing out.
So we're already at 11 here, right? So we already can't aggregate this in afterwards. Like, what is the plan to aggregate this? Do we need to get to 10 so somebody can go in and put it in the computer to get?
No, I will, your superintendent will take all of these surveys and I will enter them into,
I think
data.
going back to Toby, if we're gonna have number 5, I think you can put all that together. Talk about athletics, have one thing that deals with athletics.
Well, those are pretty different things. Which I
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, my first, my feeling is, forget the thought exchange, I don't wanna limit it. I think it tells us a lot more if we're a little bit more granular, I can't believe I'm saying that.
It's okay.
With the whole proficiency grading
I can do a survey instead, and we could always follow up with a thought exchange that doesn't have I don't wanna overwhelm people.
Right, you don't want,
But
you don't want 100 questions.
I can do a survey, a Google form survey like this one. We won't, obviously we don't want 20 questions because nobody will say, what the heck are you doing?
So is there, as a group, do we want to add the question that Toby had suggested, which is to add a second a question regarding capital investments to improve the athletic facilities in the district? Is that?
It's actually really just fields.
Fields.
Yeah.
Fields.
Yeah, I don't really think the venues are, because that would be under capital, that's under the question before, I would consider
Okay.
that would be number 9.
So one specific to athletic fields, is that what we're gonna, who would like to add that? Just a quick straw poll here.
Sure.
Alright, it's the will of the board, Julie?
Yep.
We can ask anything about the buildings?
That's number
Yes.
9.
Yeah.
It
That's
is.
number
I
9,
missed
capital
that.
investments to improve and maintain safe and
Oh,
healthy
thank you,
facilities.
thank you.
Yeah.
I missed that.
So,
Doesn't have question marks at the end or something?
I know, I
Okay,
threw this
just want-
together.
For you. I believe it. Great.
Peter, you have something?
I think this is great and everything, but I'm really skeptical that we're gonna get the turnout that we're hoping for the vote, just because they mailed out all the ballots. What percentage of people have already voted or will have voted before election day? So how many people are really gonna show up to the polls? I know in Franklin, very few showed up to actually go to the polls, because they had already turned in their ballots. And to Don's point, if there's not somebody sitting there with these, I can see them just being taken and we're never gonna see them again, because they've gotta really fill it out right there and put it back in.
So I don't know how many of these will actually get
Right.
filled out.
Would it make more sense to have a flyer that says, with the link to the survey, that people can take?
So if we get 10% on any survey, it really matters.
Because I'm still gonna email every parent, we're gonna have stuff on Facebook,
Yeah, I
front
think
porch
we're
forum,
trying to reach
you know, we do all those
different
things.
people.
Mhm.
How do we reach different people?
Old people they don't do so on social media.
What about
Yeah, if that's not your
I
only
think-
thing, I was
Yeah.
afraid we were just trying to get
Okay.
everything with
No,
that.
no, no, no.
I think it would be valuable to get the people who don't wanna go on the computer and,
Yeah.
and enter it,
Who
so.
vote?
Who vote, right, so, you know, you're gonna miss a bunch, yes, but maybe we still get a sampling that's.
You still have, your town meeting is still voice, right? So they gotta go.
Yeah, but this is for election day, right?
This is
Yeah.
for November 1.
November. This
This
is
is in November.
Oh,
the
this
next
is,
date.
oh, what, yeah, but what?
But a good point.
We could do it every town meeting.
Yes, it would be great to
Because
do
we
a
do
town
it every
meeting.
year.
Town meeting, this would be
That's,
really
that's
good.
what I was, yeah, that's.
This is gonna be
It's too late.
But it's for the next.
No, I
year.
don't, no, but I mean, like, going forward every year,
Right,
Yeah.
then we know.
So they feel involved.
right.
Well, then we'd see the topics people were supportive of or not so supportive of and lay it against the results of our vote. And
Right, that
where-
too,
Yeah,
where the
yeah.
potential
Or if we had to
weaknesses
go
are,
to
if we
a
had to go
revote,
to a
which
revote.
will never happen.
Yep.
Okay, great idea, alright, future planning. Alright, we're, in the interest of time, was there anything
Yes.
else critical here that we needed, or?
No, I appreciate that feedback, that really helps me, because we have, not a ton of time to get ready for it. I appreciate it.
Alright, plenty more budget to come over the next few months. We're now on to safety planning overview for Justina, who has patiently waited for us. We will be doing some in executive, I believe, to talk about some details of the safety plan.
Well, first I just want to apologize, but say thank you for the last meeting. I had absolutely no voice. I was on the agenda for that last meeting. I was out that day at work, thought I could make it to the next day, didn't make it to the next day. So when I say no voice, I couldn't talk, so. I didn't, Jason joined, come on up, to be a part of this. So really, we didn't plan a big presentation. I knew that you had already been through a couple of the schools anyway, so I anticipated that it was more a lot of question and answer. You might have some more specific questions. So we did just kind of pluck through. We had a BSBIT audit completed in 2016, which was pretty extensive. And Swanton scored particularly well on it. So kind of like any audit where he sat us down after going through the 2 buildings and, you know, talking through some of our processes and looking at our safety planning book. Lots of suggestions that fell in like the good, better, best range, with best being like if money wasn't an object, like a lot of consultants can do. And then just some real easy, quick wins for improvement. So for the most part, we took our safety team, which is comprised of Chris, myself, Jason, we have school nurse, teachers, psychologists, special educators, front office. We have a real mixed team on our safety team that meets monthly. We took that safety audit and really kind of plugged through and created like a multi-year plan of things that we wanted to address. So we just plucked out some things over the past 5 or 6 years, some bigger things that we've worked on. So I thought what I'd do is just kind of talk through some of those things that we've worked on kind of more recently. Maybe talk about some goals that we have for this year, and then some hopes and dreams that we have for some of our safety work. And if you want to interrupt with questions, that's fine. If you want to wait for the end, that's fine too. I didn't really put these in any particular order. We did just have some other companies that came. Summit came and worked on some adding some magnetic doors for fire safety in the Babcock building. So we've done a lot of work on the fire safety over there in particular. And those magnetic doors release when the fire alarms go off. They're particularly heavy doors, and we have really little bodies there that use the bathrooms, and the doors have to be shut. So Sometimes little kids have a real hard time with those doors. So the doors can stay propped open if they're on a magnetic release, and please, give me the facilities, right? And we did the same for the library, so that was much needed when you start to see these little hands, sticking out of the doors. Certainly the last couple of years, we've done a lot of COVID mitigation strategies and measures, so school safety work looked a little bit different. It's not like any of the other work stopped, but we had to make a lot of room for our COVID stuff. And when we think back to the very beginning, it was getting air purifiers that the board, most of you were here for, to approve in the rooms, and temperature stations, and how do we clean, and a lot of work was spent there, right down to testing and getting kids off the buses and contact tracing. One of the things that we highlighted when we were next door was, and this was one of the things straight from our audit, is our signage for our buildings. That we have a lot of doors with the two buildings, and the front office and the front doors weren't clearly labeled for emergency situations. If you were at a back door, it didn't really articulate to you that you were at a back door that wasn't staffed. Here's where you can find the front door. So we've worked to get all new signage for the doors, for the outside doors, and also inside the lobby areas to show where the nurse's office was, the front office, and the administrative offices. Let's see here. The security and video cameras was a big one. That was probably our last year. I know Terry was on the board then, right? Right before the merger, where the board really took prioritized safety, and we had did we have any cameras then?
Yeah, we had a few that were on an old system. Just very few though.
Dawn was on. I think Toby was too.
That was a priority.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
How many did we?
Originally,
Yeah.
I think we had maybe 4 outdoor cameras originally. And, we started by adding exterior cameras, then interior cameras, and we used grants and safety money for additions on that. Yeah.
Identified some holes.
Yeah.
We kind of said
Blind spots.
and thought that the blind spots would present themselves, and they did. So we've been able to plug away for those, and that's been immensely helpful. I think when it comes to vandalism, a lot of this hard work, the new playground, picnic tables, graffiti, stolen cars left in the parking lot. I mean, you kind of see it all, and those cameras have been really helpful for that. They're really only accessed for safety issues for students and staff. We did do a new fire alarm system in the Babcock building. That was COVID came and I lost my memory, like 3 years ago.
Yeah, 2.5 years ago.
So very distinct difference between the Babcock building fire alarms and Central, and I think Central's still on the list to be updated. So if you're in Babcock and the fire alarm goes off, it's like, I don't even know if I would say it's a sweet voice.
It's like your grandmother.
Oh, a fire has been detected in the building. Please exit the nearest door. I don't even know. It's nice, it's calm. Sometimes I think it's a little too calm, then you come over here and it's like what we all grew up with, like the screech and the update. So, yeah, it's loud over here. I try to get out before he pulls it because it's like ear splitting. A big one, technology, right before Derek came, the E911 compliance and the updated phone systems everywhere. That was a big part. The main feature, and I'm probably really simplifying this, is you can call 911 from any place in the building, and it'll direct you right to that room. So that room is what shows up. Some smaller kind of quick wins that we created, things that we've identified over the years, is we didn't have a good onboarding system for our late hires. So you always think that you have the bulk of your staff at the beginning of the year for in-service, and you just don't, and you certainly don't anymore. So we had this loophole of people that were getting onboarded in like September or October and needed a lot of trainings and some work on Alice, which I'll talk more about. So we created a system for that where they, as part of their onboarding and routing slips, they sit down and go through a whole safety checklist like they have an onboarding system. a little bit along the lines with that, I know that you talked with a couple of the other schools. We are also an ALICE school. All the schools in the district are using ALICE. We did just, there's ALICE trainers in each building. I'm a trainer, Chris is a trainer. The other schools have theirs. It is incredibly challenging to find the appropriate amount of staff time to spend on school safety. So you have in-service, but you're really kind of eating away at those minutes and the time. And we needed a way really to get everybody trained in the basic principles of ALICE, especially, again, late hires, to go through some of those safety measures of ALICE for an active, shooter incident. Or an intruder incident. And part of what's hard is the trainings that someone might get during in-service, where you've allocated 2 or 3 hours, looks a lot different to the couple of people that get hired in December. So finding 3 hours on a Tuesday in December is really hard. So we just, actually Derek joined our meeting today. We have, as a district, signed up for the ALICE e-learning modules, which allows for the virtual coursework for ALICE for every staff. So now you can be ensured that everybody in the district got the same training, the same way, with the same language. And then ALICE instructors can use their training, their in-person training, to do more in-depth safety work. So if everyone's trained baseline in ALICE, when I get together with staff, we can focus more on what does it look like, what does a counter look like, or a barricade, and we can kind of zero in on some more specific things for ALICE. So I think that's really exciting. I think for a school the size of like MVU and Swanton, any of them, ensuring that those late hires get that same level of training, it's really difficult to pull off, even if you make it a priority. So it also has the ability to send out, over the course of the year, they'll get little reminder emails. So if Julie takes the training next week, in like 90 days, she's automatically gonna get like a 7-minute recap or an update refresher in her inbox, so she can kind of get a little recap. So it's just constantly keeping it alive and keeping it fresh. Comes with a lot of other videos and professional development, so we can assign them to staff. I can assign some on maybe things that someone might do for a bomb threat. We do work with that anyways, but I can assign a video on that specifically to people in the front office. And so it's like a 20-minute video. So none of that hurts to hear information in a different way from a different person, see it virtually or on video, than just kind of rote conversation. So it's going to be a great tool in our toolbox. So really happy about that. Swanton worked to create a threat assessment system for the school. We certainly don't have a high level of that, which we're thankful for, but we have a threat assessment team and process that's been created within our building. We've really streamlined access to information, I feel like, within the front offices, and so things that seem easy are a little bit harder with 2 buildings. So you have 2 buildings, and then you have front office staff, and then you have the people that cover for the front office when they are on their lunch break or when they're out. So it actually becomes a lot of people that you're training and kind of keeping up to speed. So just some shared access to files for pictures and information for people that might be on a restraining order, not allowed on the premises and what have you. So that's kind of at people's fingertips. We've created and continue to work on our emergency handbook, which is quite long, similar to MVU's, if Steve had shared that. We've worked on that quite a bit over the years. Actually, the last couple of years, it's been more like refining and updating, but we do look at that every year. That has all of our emergency procedures and protocols on it. That's based off of like the state model. Every August, I go through and I have a list of emergency planning contacts that I call with representatives from just about every emergency agency that we've come across. Every August, I call them, make sure that the names are still relevant, the email addresses are still relevant, and I add or remove access to those documents appropriately, and we share our emergency documents. usually at that time, I always invite people out anytime you want. Come to the school, come for a tour. I kind of say we live locally, we could do it on a weekend. Not sure I got lots of bites on that, but some really good questions. We actually did have one agency call back and say, and ask for an emergency handbook because they're like, last week we had an administrator call from another school and actually get our email addresses and ask for it. I was like, yeah, that was me. So they said it made us realize we needed to call all the schools. So I was like, no, that was me. So you got it already. That was nice. That's kind of most, you know, the fire drills and lockdown drills. I think the school, as a school, we are really good about doing those every single month, as kind of dictated by the state. We log those. We make sure that we get them done. So I don't know if there's any other big, a lot. Well, some of our goals for this year, and I'll keep some of this a little bit general just because we're not in executive session. We do want to work on our offsite relocation system. We've identified that as something that we want to revisit and update. We've committed to bringing our safety corner back in our Friday memos, where we are doing mini blasts of safety work in every Friday memo with staff. So it's smaller, more digestible lights. They certainly get front-loaded with it with our mandatory trainings, but we revisit things. So like in this week's, just put some information on our next fire drill, dump some information in on where the AED devices are and where they can be located, right? Most know it, but it's good just throwing it in there, little bites and reminders for stuff. We did bring back, you know, you talk about the luxury that we have of those Wednesday staff meetings and having staff here on Wednesdays. It's really afforded us some great opportunities on the unassigned days or staff meeting days to focus on some of this work that the last few years we haven't been able to. So on Friday, during in-service with a pocket of staff that wasn't doing some data work, we did a tabletop exercise on a medical emergency with our UA teachers, our nurses, and our guidance in the front office. And we just kind of had a scenario that the state shared, and you get bits of information as it comes. So here's where you're at right now. What are you doing? And we broke off and talked as a group, and then you get more information and just more layers to make it more chaotic and more confusing and more unsure. And the point of the tabletop is just to talk through it. And there's no right or wrong. It's just understanding people's views and rationale and why they would do some of the things that they did. Was really, it's nice to spend time like that, and that hasn't really been something that we could do the last few years. We did return to being able to have visitors in the building. So we returned to our sign in and sign out system. Chris brought with him the idea of the stickers, which so much easier. We had kind of badges and lanyards that left with people, and that's okay, but we were making kind of a lot of them. And he's got stickers, a sticker system that he used at his previous school, and everyone in the front office loves them. So it's on his favorite, what do you call it? Carbon, most carbon. So it's on carbon, and people sign in and they throw their sticker on, and we get a copy of who's here, and if they walk out with the sticker, it's expired and it's perfect. So, but those are little things. We never had, the buildings weren't really open to people the last couple of years. So even just having visitors in the building signing in, it's like a reintroduction to that for the front office of making sure everyone's signed in. And then there's just some other things that we're working on with our camera systems and access on phones and laptops, access to those cameras. So that we have as bigger goals for this year. And I talked fast, I'm sorry.
Any questions for Justina now? Open session? Get into more specifics.
The important thing is that we know you're doing it. Because everything you talk about, the way you talk about it, you know you did it, so it's good.
Sure.
Thank you. And I was also gonna say, you started like after 9, and we all were listening to you. Thank you. That's really good information.
The drills, you say that you do monthly. Do you vary those times and so that
Yep.
it's not like
We
always
vary
the
them
same?
in time. You know, there's a wish list of things that we love to do, like practicing a fire drill during lunch would be probably a good experience, but it would really mess up lunchtime. So
You've heard that before.
so we talk about it at lunch. So instead of
Okay.
actually practicing one at lunch, we'll be in the lunchroom saying, you know, we're gonna just chat for 2 minutes, you keep eating, let's just talk about what we would do in here if there's a fire alarm. We have, one year we were able to practice in the fire, we did it on a field trip day. So I could extend, so if grade 2 was on a field trip, I could do a fire drill with first grade during lunch because they could come back in and I could extend their lunchtime to finish because there wasn't a second grade coming in after them. But it's tricky, it's tricky.
Sometimes we have natural opportunities for teachable moments. We had a pull of the fire alarm in Babcock the other day, and that required us bringing all of those students over to Central, putting them in the gym. Sometimes there are those natural opportunities to teach. It is a nice way to say it.
Find the positive in it.
Yes, that's right.
Thanks,
We had
Justina.
gone a good 3 or 4 years without a
Yeah,
poll
it's
actually, which was
beneficial.
quite impressive for us.
All right. Well, we'll make a finding that premature knowledge would put us party at substantial disadvantage, and we'll go to executive. It may be short because we've already had this conversation with a couple of schools, but just in case there are questions out there, we'll go ahead and do that. Next, we have committee updates. Julie, would you like to start on the Highgate walking path and the
Interfaith Council
Interfaith Council.
property. So yeah, we'll have this as a discussion item at our next board meeting, but 2 conversations, and actually a third one's happening tomorrow. We have a meeting about the sidewalk project at MVU tomorrow. I met with Brian, oh gosh.
Brian Savage.
Brian Savage. I almost said a different last name, and I knew that was wrong. Thank you, Don. Brian Savage, a week and a half ago, and about the Interfaith Council land that the town now owns. Our batting cage and our access road, parts of it are on the Interfaith Council property. We did know that. I don't know that they knew that when they created the access road, but we did know that more recently. Their survey, Jason and I met with Brian, that survey matched what we expected. The town is looking in what they wanna do around that. They also are looking into other property owners. They wanna do something with the back of the garage that's there. So they're exploring a lot of things. We did talk about, you know, the town isn't necessarily looking to sell it, or that was what was represented to me. We both acknowledge that selling the property and buying the property would mean 2 votes. The town, right, the electorate would have to make that decision. And to do that, you'd probably wanna have a purpose for that. I think the select board has different opinions about what to do. But in the short term, one of the things they're looking at, and I don't know that it's gonna be quick, but they want to look at a boundary adjustment. But so that our access road, is covered. But they also need to deal with another landowner. So there are a number of issues there, but I wanted to alert you to that conversation is happening. It's not an urgent conversation, but I don't know whether the select board is of one mind about it at all. But it was sort of an exploratory, but I was assured that at the very least they wanted to do a boundary adjustment for us.
That would be in our favor, sounds like.
Yes.
To help us.
Yes, to help us. Thank you for clarifying
Yeah.
that. The second piece is the Highgate, town manager reached out to me to see if I would sign on to a scope grant because they are interested in developing both their library property and then also by the Highgate Arena.
They have some plans to put a bike repair shop and some other things over by the arena, and they wanted to see if I would write a letter of support for their study about adjusting the boundaries of the walking path to go through Highgate School property. And I said, and she recognized the fact that that was denied by the Highgate School Board a few years back. And I said, I don't have the authority to write a letter of support for scope. I don't, and the board would need to do that, but I believe they would need more information about what the purpose of that is. Because I would expect there'd be concerns about a walking path going through the middle of the parking lot, for example, which was one of the conversations. So I'm wondering if you and I talk, Devin, maybe we can bring more information, or we can have someone from Highgate on that committee, share that information at the board.
Yeah, I think we definitely
Yeah.
need more information. So.
And again, as I mentioned, the sidewalk work is happening again, so I'll find out more. Jason and Laura and I are attending that meeting tomorrow.
Is that the sidewalk from St. Swanton up to MV?
Yeah.
Yes.
Alright. Okay, so those are just some
Before we
updates.
leave that, the sidewalk, that's the one we've been talking about for a decade now.
Yes, it feels like a decade. It's been at least 5 years, because it was the MVU board
So
when I
is
was
it-
here.
Is it a burning issue, or is it just?
They suddenly invited us to a meeting about it. Although last year, when we asked, is it in the future, they said probably not for several years, but then we were invited to a meeting. So perhaps their timeline has shifted.
I think it's really interesting that we have spent significant time this school year, board meetings, talking about school safety and protecting. And now we have people that wanna walk through our park.
That would be the Highgate,
You know, I'm not against walking, not against walking, but
It goes around the school currently.
who's to say that somebody that wants to get in uses a walking trail?
and that's why we need to have the discussion, so I think we will, we wanna do some research on.
Good concept, but it's funny that we're talking about safety,
Yeah.
things to do and not do, and
So we'll do some research on the previous discussions the Highgate board had, and then try to get some of the more specific information on that.
The Swanton sidewalk though is critical to us because we've agreed to put a sidewalk from there to the school.
Correct, and so it certainly has budget implications, and so I don't know what the timing is, but I think we're all very
Hoping
curious
we
to
can-
find out what the timing is.
There'd be some kind of transportation or something grants out there.
hopefully Swanton has some estimates that can move us.
Yeah. We'll
Not our estimate.
want some information on that as well, but yes, that's the important part to remember for us is when they connect it to the village, we'll be connecting Route 78 to the
And
building.
just a note, that meeting is the 26th, which explains why.
Oh, it's next week. It's not tomorrow. It's next
Jason,
week.
All right.
reminded us.
Terry, would you like to do committee update from us?
And actually, what I did was I sent everybody our minutes recently, so they have the details, okay? And just because there's some information in there, at our last meeting, we talked about some policies that we bring to the board. And I think you put those in the shared drive, did you? Or you saw them?
Not yet.
Okay, because right, because we had a couple of things we needed to discuss, okay, great. So we talked about that, and then we talked about the board governance standards that might be coming out soon. And we also talked about training with Phil Gore again. And we remember we talked about that last time, we talked about maybe we'd do some smaller workshops. And so that's why I sent you the note so you could see it in more detail, because we're kind of excited about it, we think it would be really good. What he suggested we do is have some of the administrators come and give us overviews of things that are really important that are going on. And then we kind of lean into that and ask questions about questions that we had, just to give us a bigger perspective, you know, kind of like we did tonight with the multi-tiered, but to have that moment that we could have some dialogue with them in terms of professional development. And so because we talk about it in terms of our own board governance, how can we, what are our best governance practices? And that's why it would be a professional development thing as opposed to a meeting thing.
Yeah, and if it's possible, I'd like to use
one of our previously scheduled meetings, the second meeting of the month, so that we're not asking everyone to join some more time. So I need to work that out with Julie to make sure we've got everything else on agendas and that we're not going to be skipping anything that is important for us to do. So some work to be done on scheduling for that.
We hope that you all will be excited too, because we're pretty excited about that.
All right, and now turn it over to the Facilities Committee.
All right, I'll try to go over this quickly as well. As Terry said, these minutes are out there or will be out there for everybody to see, but I'll quickly go over highlighted our meeting. We had a pretty long meeting the other day, so we became aware that there is a Vermont Public Service Department announcement that there's an HVAC grant opportunity for high poverty schools with funding between $25,000 and $250,000 with an anticipated 10% cost share. So I believe
One of the corrections is actually 10, up from 10 to 45%, depending on, yeah.
that's not as
We
attractive.
don't find that out until the second stage.
Okay. So I don't know if you're still looking into that or.
We are, because we can deny it, so if we
Okay.
don't wanna do that, we can just turn it down.
All right.
But you have to do the work before they'll tell you.
Yes. Thanks for not acknowledging that, Terry.
Really? Sorry.
So as Dawn had brought up, Swan is looking to purchase a tractor, so they had budgeted in their lease for a new tractor. So Jason got some bids on a John Deere, a Kubota, and a Massey Ferguson. Came down to two, as the Massey Ferguson was a residential tractor, they didn't have a commercial grade. And between the John Deere and the Kubota is actually about $1,000 less. It's $30,500. And Jason and his team were more impressed with that tractor anyways. So that's what the direction they'd like to go. As I said, it was budgeted in the lease, but I know Laura was looking at existing funds to purchase that, so she may be bringing that to us if we go that way.
So when you say it's in the budget, it's in the budget we're looking with, or the budget we're under?
It's in the current budget, we had a plan for leasing, but because we also have other leases that are covered by ESSER now, we have more money in our leasing line, so we could buy it outright. And so if we were leasing a tractor, we'd come to the board with a lease agreement. If we're gonna buy it outright, we wanna let you know that we have the funding to buy it outright.
So 30,000 is the annual lease?
No, that's
No,
the
that's the
payment.
total cost.
That's a total cost. It's not a gold-plated tractor with a.
No.
Just the leasing rates are not attractive right now either, so
No,
we have
I'm
the
not
money in.
recommending it, at least I'm just trying to get a handle on it. And I think, Laura, you made a really good point when I raised the issue earlier. You know, we get new board members on. I bet, this find a board member as she is, I don't think she knows we buy a tractor every year, right? And I knew, when I was at MVU we did, but I didn't know we were doing it well. So I think those reminders are really good. These are the things that we have to remember.
So Jason's had this in his 5-year plan. And I think from the last meeting we talked, we're gonna see a schedule. So we'll have an idea of each year of what we need to replace. So I think that's the direction we're heading.
That's great.
Update on the Franklin expansion construction project. As Julie mentioned before, we did get concept approval from the Agency of Education. So a couple things of note. We're gonna put in a new 6-inch water line to the school, separate from the existing water line for the fire suppression and sprinklers. So that's in a way, it's a good thing, because if we ever have an issue with our water line and we need to shut it off, we'll still have the water to the sprinklers and the fire, and vice versa. So that is a positive thing there. And what else? We'll be extending the sidewalk, so the sidewalk that's there now will go all the way to the road, connect with the other sidewalk. So we have that gap in there now. That's gonna get extended. One of the things that they showed on the new diagram is steps going up into the front of the school, because you don't notice as much now because it's a gradual, but as you bring the building out, it's much lower at the driveway. And we talked about if we could do a ramp instead, so they're gonna look at that. I talked to Laura before the meeting. Doesn't sound like that is, they're still looking at it, but it sounds like we may have to have steps going up to the school, so they're safety hazard, cleaning.
Looking at
all
every,
that.
I told him to look at every option that he possibly could, so he's going back to the civil engineers and the architects to see
Yeah.
what else we can do.
Do we need a ramp somewhere?
Oh, there would be a ramp.
There would be a ramp, but we're trying to avoid the stairs.
Oh,
Right.
If you,
only a
Stairs
ramp.
are stairs a regulation you have to have?
I think because well, I'll let Laura, you talk to me today.
When you, as Peter said, as you move it out, we have to actually, there's 4 feet 9 inches of elevation change. It doesn't look like it, but he showed us on the surveying map. And so we're trying to see if we can either come out and have a landing and then go the other way at a 90 degree. Do we have to heat the steps if we absolutely have to have steps? But for every foot, it's an inch if it's a ramp.
That's right.
So
Right.
we're, but I basically told him, we're not enthusiastic about stairs because it's ice, snow, so unless they're heated, but even that, then there's glycol that you have to have, and that involves running your system harder, and so we're doing everything we can. He knows we're not happy about the stairs.
I didn't know if there was a regulation that you had stairs, because otherwise you do see schools with paths,
Right.
paved paths, just going up.
It doesn't look like it's
I
working.
think that would take much
Right,
more
you just
space.
don't have the depth.
Right.
You take up too much parking.
Parking lot.
Yes.
A couple of small changes or designs that they had to make. They had to add a sprinkler room closet. I forgot exactly where that goes, but it's in the new section. And also a small closet off the library. I think that's for Joyce's boots or something. Actually, I'm kidding. Joyce wasn't really crazy about that. But that we needed a place to store the salt and shovels and outdoor maintenance stuff. So that's what that's going to be for. And lastly, they're going to install dormers on the north side of the building as a way to bring in fresh air. So all things that were talked about. And then the big thing, I mean, that was obviously a huge thing, but the MVU roof is going to be big to our budget coming up. We did the first phase. Now we're looking at phase 2, which is either going to be P.E.G with an estimated cost of $1.1 million or A.P.E.G, which is $1.6 million estimate. So the big thing with that is EEI is telling us we really need to have a contract signed in November. That's
December
before.
at the latest.
That's before we have a budget. It's before our budget gets voted on. So we're committing ourselves if we do that. The negative thing is if we wait another year, the roofs are all connected to each other. And we can't do, the worst one, right, is the middle one.
Yeah.
And we can't get to that until we get these phase B done.
That's a biggie, that big.
And that doesn't include the one over the gym, which is the huge one. So the longer we put this off, the more chance that we're gonna see bigger repair costs. Somehow we've got to make a decision on this, and we've got to basically sell it to the voters, understand how important this is. And as we talked about, it's going to be a big cost in our budget, obviously, but I won't go, we'll be talking about this more, but I just wanted to throw that out there to the whole board. So.
Is there any way if we can show high energy efficient electrical costs that we can use ESSER money? If we're sitting
Not by showing electrical efficiency, non-ESSER.
about heat, I mean, we could reduce the heat bill.
Performance.
It has,
The performance
performance
contracting,
contracting,
the,
sorry.
the run out on the efficiency built on that roof makes it so that it takes too long.
The return is not
The
fast
return
enough.
isn't good enough in a roof.
Because,
The
if
way
you
it
did,
is
if
for
you did the
lighting.
proper insulation of that gym roof, you could reduce your heating costs significantly.
Can I ask
We
you a
think
question?
that would be a asset point.
Go ahead, Terry.
I just wonder if you, that roof, so if we're talking each pod's gonna be about 1.6 million to redo, and then the others are gonna be bigger. Is that normal for a school that size to have the roof cost that much, or is there something special about it?
Nothing normal about that roof.
Nothing normal about that entire building.
Yeah.
It's
Is it
round.
worth it to keep
It's
putting money
round.
into it?
Well, when we did the building assessment about MVU, 3 years ago, they looked at scenarios of breaking down the pods and making them rectangular. But to do that, it's very, very costly, $20, $30 million.
Well, this is gonna be like 10, 12 million, isn't it, to get that roof fixed?
Yeah, but the plan is to do one a year over 6 years to get it done. It's still a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. There's nothing normal about that roof.
No.
So, the problem is, what's our alternative? And it's spend more money. So that's what we're up against.
We can't change the design of it now, huh?
And you can't, even if you had $10 million, you can't do it all at once.
Yeah.
It's the time.
We could probably spend another 3 hours
Sorry,
on
yeah, I'm
MVU
sorry.
roof. We'll let the facilities committee do that at their next meeting. But
We'll spend 3 hours.
Go with it, sir.
Literally.
Yeah, I figured these guys would get it all.
But yeah, that will we'll definitely spend a lot of time on that during our next couple of budget conversations as well. I'm sure that's going to be probably our biggest item.
I won't go through the Swanton Babcock. We did get assessments, high, medium, and low priority. So you guys can
That
look
was
at
well
that.
done, I enjoyed reading.
And then different phases. Few of the big things, we saw the secure double door entry, or it's not double door now, looking at that. The exterior windows we talked about. One of the big things though is and maybe Jason can explain it, we need a new electrical service.
Main electrical system, yeah.
So I don't know what it is right now.
So basically, we're running that school off of a 3-phase 400 amp service. Once we get into discussions of better air quality, more HVAC, dehumidification, we're gonna bring in a lot more sizable equipment than what is there now, because we currently don't have anything in place. So as we build more HVA units, more air handlers, more dehumidification systems, whether it's chillers, coolers, whatever we end up doing, you have to have the power supply to feed that. The other issue with that power supply is that power supply is original to 1964. It is a 60-some-odd-year-old disconnect with equally aged breakers. If that fails for good. So we are long overdue for electrical upgrades. It is a sizable cost. That starts at the pole because we're bringing in potentially up to 800, maybe 1,000 amp service. So that starts at the pole, goes under the parking lot, comes into the building, and then you got branch services from there. So it's a sizable project. Eventually, we are going to have to do it at some point, regardless.
Right now, I think they have a price tag estimated around $600,000 just to bring the power up. So. And lastly, performance contracting. We talked about that. All the different things we can do. Lighting seemed to be the best bang for the buck. And we looked at actually this Swanton seems to be a good place to do that. We saw that when we toured the Babcock building. We see that here. So I think we're gonna look at that. I think there's opportunities in Highgate too. We talked about MVU, but it's not as there's definitely opportunity there, I think, but not as high priority.
More information at the next meeting about that, but that would be budget neutral, hopefully.
So, the only other thing was that we have a deadline, right, for when we have to get rid of the fluorescent bulbs?
2024.
January 2024.
We need to start heading that direction anyway, so.
We will not be able to purchase TA light bulbs starting 2024.
But when I read the minutes, it appeared to me that Jason and John and somebody had met and put this together as a report. So does that mean we saved $150,000? Good.
Yes.
Thank you. Because to me, that's enough to have a serious conversation if everybody has it in mind. So, good, thank you.
All right. So talk about future agenda items. Budget will be coming up a lot. Continuous improvement plan report. We'll see that next time. And Tara mentioned the board development items. So future board meetings, the month of November, we will be in Franklin at the Central School Library. Our next meeting is November 1st. We'll have our business meeting at 6 p.m. We'll have our full regular meeting at 6:30 p.m. both in the same location, Franklin Central School Library. So with that, I'll accept a motion to.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Don?
You and I talked
there,
earlier, and Julie, you were gonna bring up about the VSBA. You need
That's
to
right.
vote, remember the email I talked to you about today?
Yes, when you, at the top of the meeting for agenda review, when you talked about the email, I was thinking about the Swanton conversation, but it's not a warned thing on the agenda, but it's just, does the board appoint Dawn, who's gonna be attending the business meeting for the Vermont School Board Association, as its representative?
Sometimes they get a little picky and say, well, is it in your minutes that you were, they like to pull my changes jokingly, but no, it should be an action item. Because if somebody else is attending, then they can do it, but we should, otherwise you can't vote.
Alright, so yeah, we didn't warn this as action, so if there's objection to it, then I think we'll have to have a no vote this time, but if everyone's in agreement with taking action item on this. Alright, so without objection, accept a motion to appoint Dawn to be the voting member on behalf of MVSD at the VSBA annual meeting.
So, and that's before November 1st?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's,
it's
yeah, it's
Thursday and
tomorrow,
Friday.
day after tomorrow.
Alright, so Peter's first,
Second.
Terry's second, any discussion on that? Alright.
What are you gonna be voting for, Don?
We want to vote to try to take in more taxes and increase our state aid, but let's see how far that gets. Basically, it's on the resolutions.
Thank you, Don.
Alright, yeah, thanks for
Yes,
that.
thank you.
Alright, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'm
Alright,
going to abstain on that one.
Don abstains,
I'll
I can't see Steve, is he online still?
Reddick's on too.
Oh, I did not see
Yeah, yeah.
Rennick on there. Rennick and Steve, if you could unmute and vote, that'd be great, because I can't see you.
Steve's waving his hand.
Steve's waving his hand, Steve's an aye. Anything from Rennick?
Those meetings
Alright.
are usually pretty calm, but I've been there sometimes when it really got, the vote really got
Yeah.
close on things, so.
Motion carries 601. With Dawn abstaining. Alright, so with that, accept a motion to enter executive session to discuss budgeting, I guess negotiations with the unionized support staff and non-union employees and Swanton emergency response measures. Inviting in Justina, Chris, Laura, Julie. You wanna come, Jason?
Yeah, let's see.
Okay, alright, Jason.
You want to go?
Toby's first. Peter's second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Alright, we're in executive session.